Okay, I am going to call the Tuesday, October 24th, 2023 regular council meeting to order, and I will begin with a land acknowledgement that the City of Fort Saskatchewan is located within Treaty 6 territory in Métis Nation of Alberta Region 4, the ancestral and traditional territory of the Nihilwak, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, Nakota Sioux, and Métis. And we acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations. It is because of our treaty relationship that we can live, work, and play on Treaty 6 territory. So the first item that we have is we do have an opportunity to have a consent agenda for items 3.1 and 3.2, which are council meeting minutes. Somebody like to put that forward? Councillor Harris.
I would move that we approve the consent agenda.
All right, and that's for items 3.1, the October 10th regular council meeting minutes, and October 16th regular council meeting. Are there any errors or omissions? Not seeing any, I will close the motion. Please cast your vote. And that is carried. The next is delegations. If there's anybody who wishes to speak to any of the items that are not part of the public hearing, so that would be the business license bylaw or the triannual management financial report, you are welcome to come up and have 5 minutes to have your say. Okay, nobody is here for those items, so we will take that as no for delegations. So with that, we will go into the public hearing. And so with the public hearing, once I open it, administration will give their presentation. Following their presentation, we will have an opportunity for people to come and speak in favor or opposed to the bylaw. Those who have registered will get to go first, and then anybody after them will get to go however they like in coming up to the podium. Once everybody has had an opportunity to speak in favor or opposed, and when you do come up, please state your name, that you are from Fort Saskatchewan and you're in favor or opposed so they can capture that for the record. Once we've finished all of those individuals, administration will come forward, council will have a chance to ask any additional questions, and once that's done, then we'll go to business arising from the public hearing. So with that, I am going to call the public hearing for bylaw C823 to order and invite planning to come forward. And it's my understanding Craig Thomas and Mandy Chan will be presenting. Oh, and Cherie. Got 3 of them. All right. So I have called the public hearing to order at 2:04.
Good afternoon, your worships and members of the council. My name is Mandy Chan. I'm a planner with the city, and I'm here today to present bylaw C8-23 to amend the South Fort Area Structure Plan, South Fort Ridge Meadows Outline Plan, and bylaw C9-23 to amend the Land Use Bylaw to add a new direct control district titled DCA 22 Street Oriented Public Service and Commercial Mixed Use District. These 3 amendments are being presented at the same time, and they are correlated. In the council package, a technical report was included to provide a detailed analysis of the application. For the outline of today's presentation, we will start off with the planning framework, and then we will move on to the proposed amendment, follow up from the first reading, analysis and rationale, communication, and lastly, questions. As a refresher, planning occurs within a legislated framework. The Municipal Government Act gives direction and establishes the planning framework. The framework is divided into 3 levels of responsibilities: provincial, regional, and municipal. We are here in the municipal realm, and the MGA sets out the hierarchy of planning documents, what those documents do, and how they relate to each other. As circled on the slide here, these documents including the MDP, ASP, ARP, and the land use bylaw, which includes redistricting application, and at the very bottom, it includes the developments and subdivisions. As per the MGA, the MDP and the ASP must be consistent with each other. And today we are here to discuss the ASP amendments, outline plan amendments, and the land use bylaw amendments. Let's start with the proposed amendments. Altera Engineering, on behalf of Southport Development Corporation, submitted applications to amend 3 planning documents: Southport Area Structure Plan, Bylaw C8-23, Land Use Bylaw, Bylaw C9-23, and Southport Ridge Meadows Outline Plan. The main intent of these amendments is to facilitate a church and a commercial development on the subject site. The subject site to the proposed amendment is shown in yellow. The site is located along west of Greenfield Link, north of South Ridge Boulevard, close to stormwater management facility, potential school site, and lastly, Macmillan Park in the Southport Meadows neighborhood. Moving on to the Southport Area Structural Plan Amendment. The proposed ASP amendment is to enable a church and commercial developments on the site that is currently designated for a medium-density residential development. The slide here shows the proposed amendments to the Land Use Concept Plan. On the left is the existing Southport ASP Land Use Concept Plan, and on the right is the proposed changes to the Land Use Concept Plan that replace medium-density residential designations with public service and commercial mixed use. This change reduces the overall residential land use within the ASP area by 1.26 hectare. The density of the ASP will need to remain in the range of 25 to 30 dwelling units per net residential hectare. The ASP land use stats and executive summary will need to be updated accordingly. Moving on to the Southport Ridge Meadows Outline Plan Amendment. An outline plan is a non-statutory document that addresses land uses, servicing, and further refines the details provided in the ASP. Outline plan are required to conform to the overarching ASP as well as the MDP. Please note that an outline plan is amended by Council's resolution, which requires a singular motion from Council. The proposed amendments to the outline plans include replacing the street-oriented medium-density residential with mixed use to the street-oriented public service and commercial use. On the left is the existing Southport Ridge Meadows Outline Plan Land Use Concept Plan, and on the right is the proposed Land Use Concept Plan that replaced the designation of the subject site from street-oriented medium-density residential with mixed use to street-oriented public service commercial mixed use. And just in addition to that, the land use statistic and the population tables on the outline plans will be amended to reflect these changes in the land use. Medium density residential is reduced by 1.26 and density decreases from 28.3 to 28.1 units per residential hectare. Moving on to Bylaw C9-23, Land Use Bylaw Amendments and Redistricting. The proposed amendments including adding a new direct control district to the land use bylaw and redistricting the subject site from medium density multiple residential districts to the proposed direct control district. For the context, I wanted to highlight what is a direct control district. A direct control district is a unique type of land use district. Unlike a conventional land use district, the direct control district are applied to a specific site only. They are for if council wishes to exercise particular control over the use and development of the land or buildings within an area of the municipality. They must comply with the city's statutory plans. They have customized or site-specific land use designations, a unique district that applies only to the site, and it is different from the conventional districts. They include regulations that are site-specific or limited to the proposed location. In this case, the direct control district intends to facilitate a standalone place of worship and a separate building for commercial uses. The proposed district is named Street-Oriented Public Service and Commercial Mixed Use, and the following are the key highlights of this district. The district proposed a building setback of a minimum of 4 meters with a maximum of 8 meters to public roadway. The building height will be a maximum of 2-story or 14 meters. A minimum of 121 parking stalls are proposed. The district has regulations stating that the site development pattern would generally conform with the site plan, which is shown here on the top right image, and that the architecture treatment shall conform to the church concept, which is indicating on the bottom right image. Follow-up from the first reading. Place of worship is a listed use within 14 districts, including C1 Neighborhood Retail and Service District, C2 Commercial Resident Retail and Service District, and DCA 10 South Point Neighborhood Service District. Within this developing area, there are 9 sites where are currently zoned to support a place of worship. The Sulphur Area Structural Plan identified one institutional site that is exclusively intended for a place of worship. This parcel is limited to institutional based on the landowner's development plans. Place of worship are considered appropriate within land designated for institutional and commercial purposes. According to Section 362(1)(k) of the MGA, property held by a religious body with primary use for public worship/religious is exempt from taxation. The exemption is applicable once the religious building is established on the property. The exemption applies to contiguous land, including parking areas and undeveloped lands within the property boundaries. If the adjacent area is subdivided or developed for a non-religious purpose, as shown in the proposed plan, the tax exemptions does not apply to the adjacent area. Analysis and rationale. In the MDP, the subject site is designated as the developing neighborhoods in the bright yellow color. The subject site falls within an area identified as a node. The MDP is based on an overall public interest which was established through extensive public engagement throughout the development of the plan. What we heard was residents wanted to have an engaging place and diverse housing, such as a walkable neighborhood active center. The MDP was written to be very explicit through its definitions of a node and its policy about what a node is supposed to be. As per the MDP, neighborhood nodes are described as a walkable neighborhood center and local destination for adjacent residential areas. Node generally contain high-density residential development, neighborhood-scale commercial, civic facility, and cultural, recreational, and social gathering spaces for the neighborhood. node could have recreational, commercials, or institutional focus with a cluster of diverse community amenities. Node are located local destinations for residentials that can actually walk to. They are pedestrian-friendly places with unique identity. If any of these unique elements is missing, a node will no longer be achievable. And in the coming slide, we have shown an example in the region that demonstrate a walkable center that meets the intent of the city's plan and objective, which actually includes a high-density development, commercial, and a place of worship. As mentioned, this is an example in the region that demonstrate a walkable center. A node identified is not confined to one specific site, but it includes a school and a park site, a church for culture, recreational, and social gathering spaces for the neighborhood. The walkable center example has various neighborhood commercial developments with parking actually at the rear and minimal public street parking at the front. And it also has diverse uses of residential and commercial mixed use. And most importantly, all development has to be street oriented. The example is supporting high density residential development, a mix of both street oriented medium and high density developments such as 4-story apartments or townhouses, which also provides a transition to the lower density. This slide here is a street view showing how architecture and street-oriented designs create a gateway and a focal point to the neighborhoods and the community. This view here shows how the street-oriented neighborhoods commercial creates a sense of place by the influence of architecture. Again, this shows how various commercial types of developments can be created with a street-oriented focus with opportunities of engagement. And here is an example of a street-oriented church that blends in with the surrounding developments by the influence of architecture, setback, and street-oriented design. And in the next couple slides, we will show an example of the street-oriented and vehicle-oriented developments for examples. This is an example of the street-oriented commercial, with the main entrance and big windows facing the street that creates a transparent interface for pedestrian activities. The parking is located at the rear and only public street parking at the front. Minimal setback that pushes the building closer to the sidewalk that creates a pedestrian-friendly environment. And it has high-quality architecture and building materials. This is an example of a street-oriented residential with main entrance facing the street, promoting eye on the street concept. Parking is located at the rear, minimum street parking at the front, building placement closer to the front property line, the quality of architectural feature that creates interest. This is an example of a street-oriented church concept with main entrance, windows, and covered semi-public spaces facing the street, creating a transparent interface for pedestrian activity. The parking is located at the rear. It has minimum public street parking at the front. It has minimal setback, creating a welcoming and pedestrian-friendly environment. It has high-quality architecture feature that creates a sense of place, and landscaping that creates a buffer and a place for people to gather. Now we move on to vehicle-oriented development example. This is an example of a vehicle-oriented commercial with the large window facing the street. But the setback pushes the building further back, creating a gap between the walkway and the building. A drive-through lane is located between the sidewalk and the building, prioritizing vehicles over pedestrians. Architectural features are genetic and do not create a unique sense of place. This is an example of a vehicle-oriented residential with building and the main entrance back onto the street. The setback of the building is further back from the sidewalk, creating minimal interaction to the street. Architecture does not contribute to the creating an interesting pedestrian-friendly environment. And this is an example of a vehicle-oriented church, with parking is located at the front along the public street. The entrance is not well defined and pushes away from the sidewalk due to the deeper setback. Even if the church in the picture were located closer to the sidewalk, the architecture and design do not create or have elements to contribute to the engaging front for pedestrians. Rationale. Based on the details of the proposed district, administration does not support the application. The proposed direct control district does not demonstrate or align with the MDP policy, and it creates a lower standard compared to the conventional district. It is a lower standard because the direct control district is written that the development authority is bound by the site plan and the concept image. The site plans only indicate one landscaping area and no further indication of landscaping or buffers at other areas within the plan. As per the MGA, direct control districts are adopted to facilitate a site-specific development due to the unique characteristics of the site or the development. They must align with the statutory plans. The proposed district listed many uses, but they do not align with the district's purpose and preliminary concept. The site plan illustrates two building envelopes, one for commercials and the other one for a place of worship, one specific use for each building envelope. It is unclear where or how the broad range of the listed use can be located on the site plan, as it is only intended for these two uses, a place of worship and commercial. In administration opinion, what's being proposed can be served by existing land use district C1 neighborhood retail and service district and the PS public service district that permits the intent standalone uses. As mentioned, the proposed site and the church concept are part of the DCA 22 district regulation, meaning, if approved, this is the standard that the development authority will be bound by in making decisions on the development application. The proposed site plan and church concepts demonstrates lower development standard than in conventional district. The site plan and the church concept plans and regulations of the DCA 22 district do not demonstrate or align with the MDP policies. It has no indication of residential developments on the site plan. The proposed site plans and concept plan do not support the various use listed in the district. Majority of the site is covered with parking lots, including along the street frontage. Parking adjacent to the street does not include landscape buffer or screening throughout the plan except for one designated landscaping area. Landscaping and parking design standards are not addressed in the site plans and the district regulation. And it is difficult to achieve the street-oriented developments with building setback as deep as 8 meters from the property line. As mentioned, the proposed concept plan and the church concept are part of the DCA 22 direct control district regulation, meaning this is a standard that the development authority will need to base their decision upon. This actually concludes the review of the application. For communication, the public hearing was advertised in the Fort Records for 2 consecutive weeks. Properties within the Properties within the Meadows neighborhoods were mailed in notice. Advertisements was posted on the city's website and social media accounts. And we have 8 written submissions received and submitted to council. Recommendation. Administration recommends that council defeats the above motions and maintains the South Fork Area Structure Plan, Land Use Bylaw, and South Fork Rich Meadows Outline Plan. Should the motion be defeated, administration is open to continue to discuss with the developer on potential amendments that brings the submission into compliance with the statutory plans. And at this time, I would like to answer any questions that council may have for administration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. I'll remind everybody we are still in a public hearing, so it's clarifying questions. We don't get into debate. So with that, I will open this up to questions. I can start us off if you like. So the first question that I have is, you talk about the fact that a church is tax exempt, but does that not apply to all lands, whether it's commercial or this land? And if so, how is that significant?
Your Worship, so the tax exemption would only apply once the church is established on site. So currently it is being taxed under whatever it is designated as, but as soon as the church is established, so once it's built or maybe under construction, is when the exemption would apply.
But my question is not applicable to commercial or that space? Like, if they chose a commercial space and they start building there, it's tax exempt as well?
Your Worship, no. If the exemption would only apply once the church is established. So if a church is not established, it would still be taxable. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question or not.
No, the question is, so if the church is built on either a commercial site or the site that's shown, either site would be tax exempt, correct, Mr. Fleming?
My apologies. I understand your question now, and you would be correct. Once the church is established, it's exempt regardless of the zoning that would be in place.
Okay, and then my second question, I know I asked this at first reading. It says 28.3 to 28.1 residential units per hectare. Was that not deemed insignificant, so it doesn't have to go to the EMRB for a bylaw review?
Your Worship, yes, that's correct.
Okay. I'll stay with those. I'll probably come back to you. Councillor Harris, you're next.
So looking at the plan, and adjacent to it, there's a high-density residential site to the east, correct? In that site that's adjacent to that, are there any proposal for commercial use in that, street-oriented, or all the things that you talked about in your presentation, Ms. Chan?
Through your worship to Councillor Harris, that's correct. So it is a mixed-use, street-oriented. So it will be commercials at the bottom and potential residential at the top as high density.
Okay. I just had to see. So there'll be, in this neighborhood, there will be something in the future that will fit that street-oriented development context, whereas what we would have with this particular development would be a church in the back and possibly some commercial in the future, adjacent to whatever the main road is south of there. Is that correct?
Sorry, may I get a clarification?
Okay, so let's move back to the site we're talking about today.
Yes.
There's proposed to be a church on it, but conceivably there could be some commercial that will be adjacent to the major arterial to the south, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Right, and so what the mayor was asking about is the tax exemption for the religious purposes. If there's only a church on there, then the whole site, the whole parcel is then exempt from taxation, as would be the case on any other church site in the city of Fort Saskatchewan, correct?
Yes, as long as it's actually a church site on it. However, if there's any subdivisions that are happening onto that site, or there's a different type of developments that are not religious, then the other parcel of the portion would be taxed.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty clear. So if the commercial development was proposed anywhere on that site, it has to be subject to a subdivision then. You cannot have a commercial use and a religious use on the same parcel without subdivision?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Harris, not necessarily. If you have two uses on there and let's say it would be under one parcel, the assessor would have to determine what portion of the site and the parking would be dedicated to the commercial and what would be dedicated to the church. So typically what would happen is there would be a subdivision. One parcel would be specific to commercial, the other one would be specific to the church.
So it could be subdivided and owned by the same owner. Could be the church.
Correct.
But then they would have to pay tax for the part that's not religiously oriented.
That is correct.
You've answered my question. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Blizzard.
Yeah, I've got a whole bunch of questions here, and maybe not all at once, but the conceptual, so who did the maximum and minimum? Does that come from the city, the setbacks, or is that from the person developing that's requesting this? Or the...
Through your worship to Councillor Blizzard, that's actually from the developer.
So they want the setback. Okay. And has the church been talked to about other locations? Like, I'm wondering why they're so set on this location. If there's 9 other locations.
Through your worship, Councillor Blizzard, that's probably discussions that's happening between the church group and the developer. So we're not privy to that information.
And you'll be able to answer them if they come up and speak or ask that.
Okay. And what they're looking at right now would be just building the church. I see on the conceptual drawings it shows 2 buildings, but they're looking at just building the church.
Through you, your worship, all that's in front of us right now is the amendment to the ASP, the outline plan, and the new district. So we're not sure, they're showing as part of the proposed direct control district that there is a church and a commercial building that's on the site plan. We don't know when that would happen or the sequence of how that would happen. Okay,
and I guess I've pushed it. I better leave it at that.
Okay, and again, you can ask those questions if they come up and speak. Councillor Abatoye, you're next.
Thank you for your presentation. I just had one question for you, and my question is, knowing how valuable churches are, what kind of provision does the city have for institutions like churches in our city?
Through your worship to Councillor Abatoye, could you reframe the question? Maybe I didn't completely hear it correctly. Okay.
No, my question was, what kind of provisions does the city have for institutions like churches? Like, for example, this church wants to build, a structure. What kind of support does the city have for, institutions like churches? Because if this was like a commercial requests, I'm sure that we will probably be supporting it. But so my question again is, what kind of provision do we have as a city to support institutions like churches?
Certainly. So through you, worshipped Councillor Abatoye, within our area structure plan, there is a site which is specifically identified as being a good candidate for a religious assembly. Our land use bylaw does allow for places of worship in a number of different districts, including the public services district, as well as commercial locations as well. Other than that, those policies and regulations aren't really specific in terms of supporting that type of a use.
Are you good, Councillor Abatoye? Are you good?
I'll come back, but I'm good for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If everybody doesn't mind, if we can just pause for 30 seconds, I just need to grab a glass of water here. Won't be leaving. Sorry about that. Okay, Councillor Nguyen, you're next on questions.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for the presentation. just referring to the photos of Terwilliger Town Center that you showed us, a beloved aspiration that I'm sure we're looking to recreate in some capacities here in Fort Saskatchewan. So the application shows that there are many elements of the node that are present within or that we're seeing within this neighborhood structure plan. Your last statement had a proposal that if this does fail, that we could rework the design of this to incorporate more of these features and align with the MDP. If this building was reoriented for that 4 meter setback, street oriented view, would that solve effectively most of the issues that are not being fulfilled in the classical definition of the node?
Sure. Through your worship, Councillor Nguyen, yes and no. I think right now what we can only presume is what's identified within the proposed changes. So that does include the proposed direct control district. The district itself, because it's a direct control, that would become an expression of council. So it's council's direction to the development authority when we're reviewing an application for a development permit. So that's where Ms. Chan said that the development authority would be bound by those regulations. In this particular direct control, and it's not uncommon, but it actually provides the site plan and an image of the drawing, which provides us with guidance in terms of what to approve. So if we do get an application, what we're looking at is if we get an application that is very consistent with those drawings, then we would probably be in a position of having to approve it. That being said, and what forms our recommendation is we believe that that's not consistent with the policies that are set out within the municipal development plan. So I think it would serve as a good starting point to have that conversation with them. But from what we've seen is how it's presented, it would not ensure that there is, as presented within the direct control, it would not ensure that there is a walkable design. It does not ensure that there's a mix of uses. It does not have provisions in there that talk about a higher quality design because it refers to those images. It doesn't align with policies talking about a varied and diverse design and uses. Because it's specific to and the purpose is specific to a place of worship, it's something that's used once a week. So again, with a node, it's something that's an activity center that brings people and draws people from the neighborhood to this particular area. It wouldn't meet the requirements for a node just in terms of the density. And it talks about density happening from the inside out, meaning you would have that higher density and then it would get a little bit lower as it would move out. And so this particular parcel was important for that because it was specifically for street-oriented mixed or street-oriented medium density with an opportunity for commercial. It also has a very large parking area as well. So in those respects, we believe that's why it is not in alignment with the municipal development plan. And again, the city has invested, I think, heavily in planning policies that align with the public interest by creating the municipal development plan. So it's our role when looking at applications to inform council as to whether it complies with the statutory plans or not. And so that was the basis of our recommendation.
Yeah, fair enough. If I can just touch on that for a second. So, like as in the photos that you showed us, that particular node has a variety and a large it's a large scale of land with various different buildings. This is one side. Does that play into the definition of the node and fulfilling that requirement as you see it? Just the scope of it being a standalone, I suppose.
So through your worship, are you referring to the example that we provided?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, we provided that example because it was a situation that actually had a place of worship. We wouldn't expect that it would exactly align with that, but that is just an example of what a node could be.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, folks. Several of my questions were asked by the last two councillors, but I've got a couple smaller ones perhaps. Just one to confirm what I think you said, that if this request, these motions are defeated, that doesn't mean the discussion between the developer and administration is over. You would continue to discuss.
Through your worship, to Councillor Kelly, absolutely. I think we'd welcome a conversation.
And the converse of that is, if these motions are passed, administration is pretty much bound by the drawings that you see in the application.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. It occurred to me too that the node concept, I'm still struggling with it, to be honest. I'm getting better after 6 years. But this is a brand new area, essentially on the edge of development within Fort Saskatchewan. So there's the node concept, I assume, in your planning will continue further south as the city grows out that way.
Through your worship, Councillor Kelly, yes. Right now, the municipal development plan identifies this as being a node. If this does get approved as it's proposed, we might look at, we'd have to make a decision in terms of what this area would be identified as. So because we would approve the direct control as it's proposed, it probably wouldn't qualify as a node any longer. So we may have to come back and do an amendment to the municipal development plan.
And you almost answered my next question, if I may, Mayor Katcher, and that is, what would administration have to do to reconstitute the node concept in that area if these motions are approved?
And through your worship, we'd probably have to give that some consideration. I don't know.
Sorry?
We'd probably have to give that some consideration. I don't know if I could answer it right now, but we might have to look at, say, what the future development would look like to the south.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'm top of the order again. So the question that I have of administration, because under the MDP, and I think it was 6.2.2 or something, I don't remember the exact clause, but that's what we had talked about at a previous one in the policies. So it talks about assembly versus gathering. How is it that we determine, or administration determines, that churches only are open one day a week and they're used for nothing else for gathering?
Your worship, typically a church has congregations on Sunday. I wouldn't want to assume. I would think that a lot of churches and religious assemblies do also act as community centers as well. I would just be making an assumption if I'm saying it could only be used once a week.
Okay, thank you. So my second question comes to, I know there's a community church in West Park, 2 blocks from my house, and the Alliance Church has got property over in a community neighborhood. So why were those considered as, why did administration say it was good to have those in neighborhoods?
Your worship, I think having churches and places of worship within neighborhoods are essential. In this particular case, it is identified as being a node. A place of worship can certainly work and function within a node. The reasons why we're not supporting it is specific to the policies that are set out within the MDP.
Okay, I may come back for round 3 yet. Councillor Harris?
So looking at the South Fort Ridge Meadows outline plan in our package which shows the site in question is medium residential. Please draw my thinking to the point that you're talking about nodal development, because if we stuck with that zoning, it would be medium residential, which would be a bunch of medium density, let's call it duplexes, maybe townhouses, things of that nature. There would be no node developed on that site under that particular zoning context, right?
Couple answers to that. So through your worship, Councillor Harris. So we're looking at an application that's before us. And so the municipal development plan is a document that we use as a tool to inform decision making. So we have to kind of look at any application that we get through the lens of the municipal development plan. The second response to that is...
But does the municipal development plan show this as a nodal site, which ultimately would be mixed commercial? It doesn't.
It does.
So why is the outline plan different than the MDP?
So the area structure plan it still is a high level document,
right?
And it does identify currently as this area as being for medium density residential.
Right.
In the outline plan, it is more specific, and the outline plan identifies this as being street oriented, and it also has a mixed use opportunity. So ideally, based on this planning scheme, this regulatory scheme that we have in place, ideally, if we had a district that incorporated the development of all the things that we talked about in the MDP, that would be ideal. Right now, the way it's zoned and the way the outline plan works is the expectation is it would be medium density like townhousing that would be street oriented with an opportunity for some sort of mixed use, which would be something like commercial.
So the essence of what you're getting at is that we would create a disparity between the municipal development plan and the other subservient documents to the MDP. Is that the essence of your argument?
Through your worship, if this was approved?
Yeah.
Yes.
And is that precedent setting, or does council have the ability to make whatever decision it makes for whatever reason? So I think we probably do. Would that be a fair assessment?
Your worship, the Municipal Government Act says that the plans need to be consistent with each other. So the statutory plans have to be consistent with each other. It also says when approving a direct control district that it must be subject to the policies. Our position is that the direct control as proposed does not comply with the municipal development plan.
So the essence of my question, where I'm going by asking those couple of things, are we going to create a situation where it's almost an ambiguous situation then, because if we have to be consistent through the Municipal Government Act, but we see the need from a planning perspective on one hand to approve this because it's a normal kind of thing in that area. Do you see where I'm just trying to understand where you're coming from in terms of, because there's a node to the east in the future development of that high density residential area. So it's not like we're losing a node, but you're talking about the ambiguity of this particular site being zoned in this way. Is that kind of where you're coming from?
Through your worship, I'm not sure if I quite understand what you mean by a node to the east.
Well, you heard the questions that I asked, and so I'm just trying to understand where the ambiguity or where the conflict exists if we approve this. Would we have to do anything subsequent to this in relation, as opposed to having a direct control district? Is there something that's better than a direct control district to see this happen if that were the case?
Through your worship, Councillor Harris, I think to make it happen, and it's council's will, I think to do it correctly, to allow for the direct control to happen, is the MDP should be amended to remove the node designation.
Okay, are you good for now?
Yeah, I guess I just don't see the node designation in the MDP, so I'm missing something. So, but go on with other questions, and I'll sort through.
Okay, so I'm not seeing anybody else. There will be an opportunity to ask questions after. So with that, thank you. I'll have you take your seats back there. And at this point in time, I will open it up to the public to come forward and speak in favor or opposed. We have two that have pre-registered, so they get to come first, and each one will have 5 minutes. So the first one who has pre-registered is Brent Kellington with the Bridge Church. So as I indicated before, come forward, state your name, and that if you're in favor or opposed, and then you will have 5 minutes. And then question. Councillor Harris, can you grab him some?
Thank you so much.
And then, of course, after each presentation, the council will have an opportunity to ask questions.
Sorry, bit of a cold, so I'm just fighting through that. But so my name is Brent Kellington, and I am in favor of the motion for the amendments. And should I repeat that? Sorry. So thank you, Mayor Katcher, to all of council and to administration. My name is Brent Kellington, and as a councillor for Bridge Church and a proud member of the congregation, I want to thank the congregation that has been here today with us and online. I'm very thankful to have the opportunity to speak with you today. I know administration is advising against the land use change we are requesting, and the opportunity to tell you why it is the right move for this city is something I really appreciate. Our pastor, Ryan Peaty, will be telling you more about the Bridge Church history and vision, but I want to speak directly to the land use you are voting on today. First, we've spent years thoughtfully looking for our future home. We're on the fourth floor of a medical building, which isn't ideal, and as we have grown, we need a new and bigger place. Over a year ago, I did meet with planning and development, and a few times. After discussing possible locations, the consensus location was Square One, which was already zoned for a place of worship. It wasn't ideal for us to be on the top floor of a medical building again, but it could work for the community, and we want to involve more of the community, and so if everything else was good, it would work. We spent over $10,000 in partnering with another group in looking at inspections, etc. It just wasn't going to be feasible to make it work and to bring that building up to date. So we continued the search and we broadened our scope, and that is when we were able to put together this deal. Now, during this meeting, administration suggested commercial property with a map of red highlighted locations. That map is misleading. Those properties are not all currently for sale. Some of those are more costly, significantly, and still need to pass permitting, and they'd have obstacles such as parking. One of them would be ruled out just based on that alone. Access is an issue. The timeline of development is an issue for some of those properties. And unless administration is suggesting the council top up our budget by $2 million, which I don't think they are, we couldn't really work the deal that we have. So I suggest we work with the one that we do. Also, administration mentioned that this is highlighted as, I said a hub, but it's a node, and that it would be better as possibly townhouse-style housing. That's not a node. Not one townhouse project in this entire city has a public gathering point. In fact, privacy, I can tell you as a real estate agent, is one of the biggest demands for folks looking for close quarters. Also, you know who doesn't like a home that's 10 meters off from a busy road? Home buyers. So this, on the other hand, is an amazing hub. Bridge Church is now and has always been for the fort. This new facility allows us to live that even more so. It would make the community more walkable and vibrant with a vision. We assemble one morning a week, and the community, they can gather and use the open concept design. Wait, I'll scoot to a picture of the open concept design. they can use that the other 6.5 days of the week. We add a business aspect to help us offset the enormous cost of developing this, and we add value to the community through having a business in the area. We double the use of a required parking lot that we have to add, and we add value through the business servicing the community. You also get to gain tax revenue at a higher business tax rate from a church property. It's win, 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 win. This isn't about population density, as administration has agreed. It really isn't about taxation when you consider administration is recommending church use commercial real estate, which would be a much, much bigger loss. I don't believe this council or administration is anti-church. I know you work with community groups yourselves that would benefit on us having this location. We spent years discussing with organizations and businesses how we can better serve in Fort Saskatchewan. Access to space is number one with a bullet. This building on this location does just that. Imagine a meeting space for community groups, gathering places for ceremonies or grads, maybe judo, or the library we've discussed, having a drop-off and connection spot in a whole new area of town. Imagine being a drop-off point for community donations or a 3-on-3 basketball tournament in our parking lot. Or how about low-income expanded hours daycare service provided by industry leaders? Because we've talked about that too. Our community fund or a community fundraiser with food trucks and children's games. This building, this location is not just for the community, this is for the fort. And we need your vote today to make this vision real. I thank you in advance for your support, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Very good. 3 seconds off.
Want me to try again?
No. Okay, well, we'll open it up for questions. Once again, it's a public hearing, so it's not debating with the presenters. Can you stop the time clock too, please? Okay, so Councillor Blizzard, I think you're first.
I don't know who designed this building, but it looks very business-like to me, like it belongs maybe in a light industrial park. Is this the intent? To me, it doesn't even look anything like a church, like an enhancement to a community. Are you stuck on this design, or is that something you're still working on?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. It is an illustration. We have to work towards something. Part of it is in the design of it. We've tried to make big open spaces that have gathering points for community groups. We've talked about a daycare potentially being able to use space for the $10 a day daycare and or others. But any group could use those large spaces that are open. So that sort of dictates. The other is budget. Truthfully, this land isn't being donated to us. We're buying it. And we're not coming forth asking for money from council. We're going to be investing this. So part of the design is a wide open kind of barnish feel. I hear what you're saying. It's a little lower in expense. Some of those churches, etc., whatever that you saw, even those townhouses, I'd love to know the price tag on those. They're not starting in the low 200s, that's for sure. And so things do cost more, but are we willing to work with administration to be able to have something that's a better design? Absolutely, because we believe in what we're doing. And if that's the hindrance, you know, we can work with that. But at the same time, it's, you know, I having the use of the facility and having it be practical for the community is first and foremost in our minds. The design isn't secondary in the idea it's not important, but it's just probably at this phase where we're spending money on it wasn't the, you know, how do you design it? We can make the picnic tables cooler.
You mentioned that the city would still get higher taxes because some of it is commercial versus residential. We were just told the opposite. We're actually losing. But so, right. Number one, I don't know where you're figuring or how your calculations are.
Right. So here's my calculation. Their suggestion is on the map where they had all the different locations, they were all commercial except for one, which was the one I said we did spend $10,000 researching. The reason that there isn't place of worship as a primary use, I don't know. I mean, administration just said they think that having a place of worship in the community is important. They haven't designated any that way. So if we're using a commercial space, like Mayor Katcher asked earlier, you're gonna lose that commercial, which is 60% versus 40% in residential versus commercial. You're gonna lose all of that. So it's not, I'm saying you're going to have some revenue here with this business that we're looking to put on there. And the purpose of that is so that we can sell a business in the area and help take the funds and put it towards building this project. So we're not looking at a sunset clause. We want to get going.
So when you mentioned about the second building, I was going to ask that too. So are you looking at you'll do it right away? Is that where a potential daycare could be? I maybe didn't understand that.
Yeah. So we're hoping for potential of putting in a business like maybe a coffee shop or something that would be there that could go in, again, take advantage of the fact that we have parking right there. So it has some extra value for them. We could use that revenue then of selling that to them to build our building because we're
okay. It wouldn't be within your, when you first said it, I thought you were talking about, I think there was one church that ran a play school.
Right. So the daycare we did discuss with industry about running an extended hours daycare in there because that's something industry would like to see to help the community and to help employees. So we could potentially do that. The building itself is diverse enough to answer all of those things.
Okay, I'll put you on round two if you would like to speak again. I've got others in the order. So if you go beyond the two, you'll get moved. Councillor Kelly, you're next.
Brent, how are you?
I'm good, sir. How are you?
You speak with the same passion you did 7 years ago for a new football field, and I remember that vividly.
I invite you out to the playoffs that are coming up there soon. It'll be a packed house.
That's excellent. So we digressed. In Southport, across from the Catholic High School and the soccer pitches that are there, there is a significant piece of property that's zoned for a place of worship. Mm-hmm. That has sat empty for 20 years now, approximately, maybe longer. Mm-hmm. Why don't you buy that place and develop it and do us all a favor?
Well, that's the Alliance Church that has that property, and it was part of the difference here is that was gifted to them as a very generous gift, and they still have plans and want to develop it too. It's been a process for them, and they've gone through some things. So I hear you on where that would be, but that's not their interest, and just like I can't force Councillor Harris to sell his house to me, I can't force another place to do anything with their properties.
And I'm not suggesting you could.
No,
but have you made an offer to them?
We have had discussions with them, and we've looked at different things of how we could structure things possibly. They're on a different timeline with us as well and have different plans of what they want to do. We're supportive of each other. More churches is a good thing, but we're not on the same page.
I've had my two, Mayor Catcher. Come back to me, please.
Okay, Councillor Harris. So Brent, how many? Whoops, jeez.
So Brent, how many congregants do you have in your flock?
Well, Pastor Ryan will probably answer this better, but we are over 400, and we started before COVID with just a few houses where we were meeting together in people's living rooms.
Okay, so you represent a group of people with a common interest, common belief.
Yeah, that's not the whole congregation, but it's just a few.
I kind of get that. Anyways, so with respect to this particular development that you're proposing, you've been talking to the developer about buying the property, owning it totally right now, building the church, and appropriate parking, and in the future subdividing it under your ownership and developing it for commercial purposes adjacent to the main drag. Is that correct? That's what I understand.
Councillor Harris, I think our goal would be to sell that property sooner because the purchase of the land as a whole is expensive. Even this process has some cost for us. If we were able to sell that property to an appropriate business, we could then take those funds and quickly do this so that Councillor Kelly is not saying 20 years from now we haven't developed on there.
Yeah, and those are all your own business decisions.
Yes,
both from a church development and a subsequent commercial development. But you wouldn't propose or you're not leading us to believe that you would build your church and then have this other site as a kind of a revenue potential that you would operate yourselves, is what I'm hearing. And the answer to that is no. You just as soon divest it to a third party commercial venture that would do that, correct?
Yeah, if we had all the money in the world, maybe we'd hold on to that and do something different. But we might then go to the Alliance Church and write them a bigger check.
One final question.
Yep.
If that were the case, did you look at the church being fronting out onto the main drag and possibly some medium density residential at the back? Kind of almost flipping your thing, and then ultimately,
Yeah,
or only buying part of it from the developer, kind of.
yeah. I think the net on having a commercial property versus the small amount of housing you'd probably net out better on tax revenue for that. But I also think as a node, you'd probably be better to have a commercial business that attracts more people in the community. And anyone who's investing there is going to be wanting the people walking there from the community. Like townhouses, the idea that townhouses attract a bunch of people that gather together is ridiculous. It's about privacy.
I'll put you on for the next round, Councillor Abatoye.
Thank you, Brent, for your presentation. My first question is, has this property or land been purchased already? Because I'm asking this question because of two reasons. One of the emails we received said that you're in the process of purchasing, but when I go on the South Fort Meadows website, it says that this is Bridge Church's future site, right? So just curious, have you already purchased the land, or are you in the process of purchasing the land?
Yeah, good question. And thank you. No, we haven't purchased. We have a purchase in place, an agreement in place on an offer in place based on being able to do this, because we weren't buying this land.
So it's a conditional.
Too big
so
of
you
a
have a
risk.
conditional offer. Okay.
Yeah, too big of a risk for
thank
our
you.
congregation's purse, right? It's not really our money. So does that make sense?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, no, it does. Thank you. So just to be clear, and because one of the councillors already asked my question, so you're looking at starting the commercial part of it first, and then when that goes off, then you start to build a church. So the timeline for building a church is not right away. It's still like a future thing.
Yeah. The exact timeline I don't have in front of me here, but it would be pretty quick. We're coming to a lease end where we currently are, and that's part of the impetus of trying to move forward. It's twofold. We're growing, and we need more space. But secondary to that, we'd like this to be going forward so we can do more in the community in that sense. So that didn't answer your question at all, but we're not thinking long term down the road, because as soon as we do have an agreement in this place, we are going to be buying this property, and then we have real costs right in front of us right away. We want to move there and eliminate the cost we have right now of renting where we are.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Nguyen.
Yeah, thanks, Brent. You're doing a great job batting these out of the park here. Just a question on site selection again, because there was that one site right by South Point School, I guess. Can you just elaborate? You might have been talking about that site already, but I don't think you've addressed that one. Why this site is, and you don't have to go into all of the specifics about the merits of this site. We've heard that already, but why was that South Point School adjacent site not considered for this proposal?
I don't believe that parcel is willing to sell to us right now. So I think that's part of it. You have to find someone that is willing to sell to you and at a price that we're in the same price point too.
Okay.
Some of these parcels that were listed there are millions and millions of dollars more.
Yep. Thank you. Yep. That's it.
Okay. Thank you. I just had one question. So you said Pastor Ryan is going to be coming and speaking at some point, so we can ask him the questions about what the church does, I suppose, and give you a break?
Yeah, for sure. He's awesome with that.
Okay. I said I would put Councillor Blizzard. Are you any more questions? You're good. Councillor Kelly, you're on for round 2.
I think maybe easier questions. You indicated a willingness to work with administration on the design. If council approves these motions, what assurance does council have that you're actually going to work with administration on design? And what commitment will you have to that effort?
Well, we believe in the project, and the one parameter we would have, I guess, in the design process is budget. And I think that's fair. Again, I'm going to go back to the words of we think that administration believes that a church in a community is important. There's not a lot of churches that are coming forward with an unlimited budget on things to do, and certainly not ours. We put our budget back into the community of Fort Saskatchewan. So, yes, I would say yes, but I don't want to mislead you that we could do like some of what I saw in there, those big aspens that are, the design of the wood, etc., on the front of that church. It's beautiful. I don't know what that would cost. So some of that would become a real restriction for us. But other than that, the setbacks, all the other stuff, yeah, absolutely we can work with administration. Absolutely we can work with council. We want something you're proud of too, because we want you all work with community groups. We want them using it as well and to be proud to be there.
Okay, I'm going to ask you one more question, and this is me sitting up here thinking aloud, all right?
Love it.
If the city were to establish a bus service to Sherwood Park, someplace with more parking and a pit stop for the buses 5 days a week might be nice to have. Would your church entertain a proposal like that?
A parking hub, or a bus hub there?
Well, not with bus shelters and the rest of it, but let's say a park and ride location. Just drop your car, hop on a bus for a couple hours, come back.
Let me start with this. If there's one thing you know about me, I'm about getting deals done, right? And so the quick answer is you bet. You bet we're excited about that idea.
And I have no idea, Mr. Kellington, whether it would work or not.
Yeah.
I'm just placing the spitball, okay?
Yeah, for sure. And it's wise. We're very willing to look at those because that was part of Taurus Field as well. We looked at expanding the scope of it and adding in the bus, and that changed a lot of things for it. So yeah, we're open to ideas for sure.
Okay, you're good? Okay.
One more, please.
Okay, sorry. Okay, go ahead.
I backed off a little too quickly. Vacant land sitting in the middle of developed areas does not do the community any good. You and I would agree on that.
Yes.
So what sort of sunset clause would you be willing to negotiate with administration so that if council approves this, we know that something's going to happen within a reasonable period of time?
Yeah, I thought that was a good question 2 weeks ago when you asked, and I respect where that's coming from. I will say the Alliance one at least is beside a big park and they're using soccer fields there. But yes, I hear what you're saying. And I guess the difference that I'm going to denote again is that was donated and then they've raised funds towards building. We're literally purchasing this with a mortgage day one. So we're going to have a mortgage, a loan against this property and so we can't have a loan and be renting out somewhere else. We just don't have that. So we would work with you in a sunset clause in some way. I don't have any concerns that we're going to be working ahead of it anyways. We want to be there. We want to see this happen.
And trust me, I hope you are. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, you can help.
Okay, thank you very much. That looks like everything, all the questions for you at this point in time.
Thank you.
So the second person that has pre-registered is Andrew Usnick with Strata Developments. Once again, state your name if you're in favor or opposed, and you will have 5 minutes once you've stated your name. Just push the button. Okay.
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of Council. My name is Andrew Usnick with South Fort Development Corporation, speaking in favor of the bylaws. Today's application is an exciting opportunity for our community. Currently, the South Fort Meadows neighborhood lacks an indoor gathering place to complement our outdoor gathering place, Leslie McMillan Park. I'll be focusing my presentation responding to administration's reasons for non-support of our application. First is node functionality. The report references a lost opportunity for medium-density housing products as justification for not supporting the node policy. The site is currently zoned for RMM, which allows a density between 30 and 70 units per net developable hectare. However, administration specifically mentions housing products like townhouses and four-story buildings that typically exceed this density. The site, as planned, would most likely end up being a duplex site, which is a housing product that is already well represented within our community. During first reading, admin defined a node as a walkable neighborhood center and local destination that may contain neighborhood scale commercial and cultural, recreation, and social gathering spaces. To be clear, our application is an exceptional example of satisfying the node policy. However, it's important to be clear that this location is not identified as a node in the city's NDP. As you can see from the attached map, the node is to be located at the intersection of Southridge Boulevard and a future arterial that will connect to development south in the annexation lands. This site is located at the intersection of Southridge Boulevard and Greenfield Link, shown on the image with a red star. Next rationale is the loss of street-oriented development. There are a number of regulations in the draft DC that ensure street-oriented development. The minimum front setback is reduced to 4 meters. There is policy that restricts parking between buildings and the street and requires the entrances of the buildings to face the street. These are regulations that are not part of the approved RMM zoning, which means we are creating street-oriented development where it is already approved for something that is not. Street-oriented development means developing in a way that creates a positive aesthetic for major roadways and interacts well with the pedestrians traveling adjacent to them. It does not mean restricting vehicles and making a site only accessible to pedestrians. Proper street-oriented development should enhance the experience for everyone. Vehicle parking. The report claims that this site fails by offering an overabundance of parking. The proposed place of worship has hours where a large amount of parking is required. However, since there is not the same intensity during the majority of hours, it has been proposed through the DC regulations that any adjacent commercial share these parking facilities instead of building more redundant parking that would be required if we considered these separate commercial and institutional sites. Our proposal is literally the opposite of an overabundance of parking. I also want to make clear that the image shown here in the report is a tentative site plan. Similar to any purchaser, the Bridge Church would not undertake and finalize design work until they know Council supports the use and the bylaw being presented today. The report cites a lack of housing diversity caused by removing the medium density site. Moving along Greenfield Link, we see estate lots, zero lot line, duplex, shallow lot product with basement suites, triple car garage, single family, and townhouses. Townhouses, the housing product that admin feels is missing, is across the street from this site. Furthermore, there is a future 11.5 acre high density multi-site across the road. This site requires a density greater than 70 units. That means townhouses, stacked townhouses, apartment and condo buildings of various heights. Respectfully, I would challenge administration to find more housing diversity on a street across the entire region. The report cites the proposal does not demonstrate mixed-use functionality. First, I need to clarify that a mixed-use site does not require the various uses to be contained within the same building. That may be a preference of admin, but a site with multiple uses is still mixed-use. As I previously touched on, if residential were to be located above a commercial in a 4-story building, that would exceed the maximum density permitted. So it would be impossible to fulfill this desire from admin for a specific building type and a specific permitted density. And given administration's presentation previously, the example they used was a number of buildings with different uses, not necessarily stacked on each other. Finally, I'll just close on alternate sites, and as it's been already discussed, there are alternate sites in the city that would allow a place of worship, but those lands are privately owned by different groups. They may not be for sale, or for sale for a price that makes it a viable option, which is why Bridge Church has identified this site as their ideal location. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I wonder if I beat by 3 seconds as well.
No, you're 8 seconds. Okay, so I will open it up to questions of Mr. Usnick. Councillor Blizzard.
So if this parcel, one of the issues is this having some residential on there, mixed use, is this not big enough to divide it and instead of having a commercial area, have some of it as a mixed use? Maybe a tiny bit smaller church and make sure both fit in there, and then maybe it would still qualify as a node, which I'll ask later if that would work.
So I guess my response to that, pardon me, through your worship, my response, Councillor, would be, I mean, hypothetically, I guess you could, but there's depth issues. When you're servicing a site for residential, you need a certain amount of area to not only create the residential units, but also the private road that leads to those units and to the on-site parking on it. So it makes it quite difficult to do that. So really here, when we looked at this application, the Bridge Church approached us about this site. So the primary lens that we looked upon first was making sure that the place of worship that they want to create could be created on this parcel. And then with the remaining balance of the land, we tried to get creative on what would be the highest and best use for the remaining parcel in terms of the benefit of the community. And as I mentioned in my presentation, we have an overabundance of different residential uses and future residential uses for this area, but we don't have any indoor gathering places or small-scale commercial services. So on our review, based on what is easily serviceable and based on what the community needs, we thought this was the highest and best use.
Okay, and you're willing to talk more with admin if this gets defeated?
I mean, we will always talk to admin, but I should be very clear in the sense that this site is already approved for RMM. That would not require us coming back to council for that. So if this application was denied, in the meantime, and in lieu of a separate application, it is already approved for that duplex site that I mentioned.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harris.
Mr. Usnick, can you bring up the map where you talked about the alternate node to the west? Okay, the site in question is... talk to me about this map. Maybe I'm drawing the wrong conclusions from this.
So what is not shown in the NDP, because the annexation, there is not an area structure plan in place for the annexation lands, but the design brief that council accepted for information a few months ago shows that the proposed arterial road leading to the south is connected right here from Southridge Boulevard and then extends south.
Right.
The connection at Greenfield Link is not intended to continue as an arterial road because essentially transportation doesn't want to create a speedway corridor there. So it makes sense that if there is an arterial road meeting another future arterial road where you're going to have the largest amount of traffic flow, that would be an area that would fit the criteria of what admin described as their vision for a node. So it is my understanding that the reason that this node was put in at that intersection was because of those traffic measures. Our location is going to be the intersection of the arterial and a collector road here. And it's been mentioned both at first reading and during the presentation today that administration also feels that the high density site located where my cursor is right now also qualifies for that node criteria. But on the mapping that the city has, as you can see, it's not shown, there's no opaque shading over it. So it leads to confusion from our end, and I think the entire development industry, because we need to plan communities thoughtfully with the planning documents that are in place. And it can be confusing and challenging when administration may use blanket policy in locations that is not already shown on those planning documents.
So as the owner of the land in that area, second question, ultimately you're in a position, if this was approved, to ultimately work with our administration to ensure that all of our planning documents are consistent relative to, I guess, the future development of the node to the west of this site at that future arterial roadway. And also on the high density site that we talked about earlier, and that's why I asked that question. So ultimately, so the question is, we wouldn't have too much commercial development in that area.
No, I mean, at this point, that would be the only commercial development. As administration presented, the high density area where my cursor is right now, is shown as high density with the potential for mixed use. There is no requirement for mixed use. So I can't presuppose who that future buyer is and whether or not their vision for that area includes or does not include commercial.
But if you as the landowner support a particular future use, ultimately we move in that direction, and then ultimately you as the developer sell it when you have a willing purchaser, correct?
Yeah, and kind of touching on a previous question from the previous presenter, typically when we do a land sale to anyone, it's typically conditional on council's approval of the zoning application. Yeah. So in a situation like that, we would be back here the same way, having a zoning application for council, explaining our reasoning for why we brought this application for and why we think it's a benefit. And inevitably at that time, council would either agree or disagree, which would dictate if that sale were to happen or not.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I'm next in the speaking order. So I've actually gone and looked at the land use concept map. So as you come down that street on the left side, so up where your little blue dot is there, so to the left of that, that is park but future school site.
Correct.
And then up from there is highway commercial. So we've on the land use concept map, it's got a dotted line because I anticipate that's all going to be part of the new ASP that comes forward? Like there's nothing set for what's going to be across the road?
That's correct. Right now, there is no planning in place for the land to the south. So through the process of an area structure plan in those areas, that's where the discussion happens with administration over appropriate uses, which would then be brought forward for council approval.
So I guess the only question that I have as a developer, so that if you're going to have a future school site of 1,400 and you've got some highway commercial and you're going to have high density across from there, what's the downside of putting a church there? Something that's...
Well, Your Worship, I mean, I think it's pretty fair to say that if we didn't think this was a benefit to our community, we wouldn't bring forward this application regardless. The land directly adjacent to the proposed church site is not built and occupied. So if we were to bring forward a use that we would feel would devalue our community or be something that future residents wouldn't want to live by, we'd essentially be shooting ourselves in the foot in terms of being able to execute and sell those properties. So bringing it forward, we think it's a benefit because, again, there is highway commercial available along 21, but right now there is no indoor gathering place like a place of worship would offer, and no small-scale neighborhood commercial within our neighborhood. We think adding those services will add value to those future purchasers.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go on to round two. Councillor Blizzard.
I don't go in this area that often. Are those roads finished that are on the where it's sitting, the corners that it's on? Or is this going to be the impetus for finishing the roads?
No, so right now there is a termination point on both of those roads. The underground infrastructure was just completed before the snowfall, and so the final road surface will be constructed next spring and summer, regardless on whether this application is approved or not. Okay. Those roads are being completed next year.
And what about all the areas here? I assume they're not done. There's no housing in that vicinity, right? That backs onto those?
To backs onto it, no. There's a stage that we built this year that backs onto Leslie McMillan Park. The space between that and this proposed road is currently undeveloped.
So that might help you with house sales?
I would say unobjectively that the majority of home buyers would rather back onto a church site than a duplex rental site, yes.
Okay, thank you. That looks like all the questions for you. Thank you very much for coming out. So those were our two registered ones. So the floor is now open for anybody who wishes to come forward. So same process, come up to the podium, state your name, and if you're in favor or opposed.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Mayor and councilors. Thanks for a chance to speak. My name is Ryan Peaty. I'm the pastor of Bridge Church, and I speak in favor of this motion. And I think it'd be good to maybe share a little bit of our story with you and how we came to this point.
Okay, just can we pause for a second? You've got him only on 28 seconds or minus 28 seconds. So if you can restart your clock, go ahead.
I would love more than 28 seconds.
Oh, just push your button again. There you go.
There we go. So where did Bridge Church come from? What are we all about? Well, Bridge Church started off, there's a number of families that every Sunday commute from Fort Saskatchewan into Edmonton or Sherwood Park for church every Sunday. And there was a group of families at Bethel Community Church in Northeast Edmonton that commuted every Sunday into the fort, or out of the fort, to go to church in Edmonton. And we recognized that Fort Saskatchewan had grown exponentially in the previous decade, but church growth hadn't kept up with city growth. And so a group of 9 families, including my own, began to meet in a living room in South Fort in 2018. And we began to ask the question together, how could we build a church that's not just a blessing to its members, but a church that could be a vibrant part of its city and a blessing to its city. A church that didn't pretend to have all the answers, but a church with a curious posture that sought to come alongside and support the good things already happening within Fort Saskatchewan. And so we met in our homes until we were roughly 100 people, and that's a lot of people for anybody's living room. And so we began to rent at the Dallas Centennial Center starting in the fall of 2019. Well, shortly after that, we signed a 5-year lease with the Ross Creek Professional Center, and we meet on the 4th floor of a medical building, which we've made work, but it's hardly ideal. COVID came along and threatened the very existence of our church. Many churches lost members, closed their doors. But by God's grace and a great team, and probably a whole lot of Brent Kellington too along the way, we thrived during COVID. We did our best to follow all of the rules, but come up with creative ways that we could meet people's spiritual needs in the city. You might remember we did multiple drive-in services, including the very first Easter in the parking lot at the Dallas Centennial Center. And this got national attention, made Fort Saskatchewan look really good, I think. We did our best, and through that, we've grown and grown. Of course, we were able to meet again after COVID, and now we're about 400 people who are actively connected at least a couple times a month in our church. So our vision as a church is to be for the fort. We want to be one of Fort Saskatchewan's best cheerleaders, actively supporting and partnering with multiple charities. And over the last number of years, we've partnered with everybody and tried to support everybody in this city. And we've been in talks for 4 years now with other charities about the need for space in this city. And could we work together to open not simply a church, but a community hub where charities can come together, where people can have their holistic needs met, not just their spiritual needs. And so our vision for this building, I like that you said, it kind of doesn't look like a church. And that's kind of actually the point. We don't want it to look like a church. We want it to be a place where people don't just gather 1 hour a week, or depending how long the sermon is, an hour and a half a week on a Sunday morning, but a place that is filled with the community all week long, meeting the holistic needs of citizens. No matter who people are, no matter what their background is, we want this to be a place where people can come together. Like Brent said, we could have graduations there. We could have different groups meet there. We have different charities, maybe even headquarters there with us. So since 2020, after our drive-in service, we grew very, very quickly to a couple hundred people and then a few hundred people. And so we have done the work of searching for a home. We've knocked on many doors, kicked a whole lot of tires, looked at a multitude of options. And like Brent said, we've even put down money to research these different options, and I'm referring to Square One. And we've come to the determination that this is the best spot for us, and this is the time for us. And I want to say that, we're willing to work with administration to help make it fit the neighborhood and the vision of the neighborhood and meet the plans. But at the end of the day, this is about people. People who want to gather, people who want to serve this city, and we believe that this is a really wonderful spot to do it. So I think that's everything. And do I sit here and do you ask me questions now? Is that how that works?
Yes.
Okay. But anyway, thank you so much for your time, for your service to the city. And yeah, we want to be for the fort and support the city however we can.
Great. Thank you. We will go to questions. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, and nice to meet you.
Hi.
I'm going to ask you essentially the same questions I asked Mr. Kellington. Are you comfortable with some form of sunset clause so that council will know that something's going to happen in a reasonable amount of time?
Yeah, I'll level with you. For us, this is very, very important. Our lease comes to an end at the end of August. We might be able to go month to month where we're at, but that's not guaranteed. So for us, we're purchasing this land at market value as a church. We're going to have to pay a mortgage on the land. So we are highly motivated to get in this space as soon as possible. We are a church that is funded by its people. You know, we have families with 3-4 kids who've given $10,000 to this building because they believe in the vision. So we can't waste money. You know, there's some church organizations that have a big hierarchy. You know, maybe they can sell a painting in the Vatican to pay for a building, but we're it. This is funded by our people. So you can put a sunset clause on it because really, if we don't build it, it's a sunset for the church. We are highly motivated to make this happen as soon as possible.
Perfect. I like that answer. And I had similar concerns to, I think, maybe 1 or 2 comments from Councillor, comments phrased as questions at least, about what I judged to be the appearance of the building based on the information we were given to us. Would you be prepared to work with administration to come to some different, more, and I hesitate to use prettier, but something that meets the planning that we put in place within our municipal development plan?
Is that picture up there the newer picture? I mean, the first pictures look just awful. They're made on a computer by somebody. I don't actually think this is that ugly. I guess we don't want to be delayed in the process if possible. We would love for you to approve it today. But do you have our word that we would work with administration to try to address those needs? Absolutely. We don't want to be a big sore thumb in the neighborhood. People go, man, everything's so beautifully planned, and there's that ugly church. So we would love to be approved so we could start going because we're on a timeline. But yeah, we would absolutely work with administration. But I think, like Brent said, we're also on a budget. So, you know, maybe it's a give and take there.
I know what that feels like. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Harris.
So you're leasing space in the Ross Creek Medical up on the 4th floor.
Yes, sir.
Do you know if the landlord is receiving an exemption for the fact that you're a religious organization leasing space from them? That might be a question of administration.
I'm not aware of our landlord's finances and how that works.
Okay, so yeah, it's a question for Claire. I wasn't sure if you were aware because
that's a really good question, though.
Well, ultimately, if you own this property, I understand you will ultimately be exempt from taxation for the portion for religious purposes.
That's my understanding. But then the commercial piece that we would sell off, you would receive the taxes on that.
Yeah, fair enough. I'll ask administration. I just was checking to see if you knew. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So I've only got one question for you, and I said I would ask you instead of Mr. Kellington. So just talk a little bit about more what your church and the offerings, that it's not just Sunday for 1.5 or 2 hours.
Yeah. Well, churches have a lot of things going on. You have your women's groups with kids that come in the middle of the week and they can hang out together and have coffee. You got your youth group that meets different times, of course. We do something called For the Fort where we'll actually shut down our Sunday service and then take our congregation, hundreds of us, send us out in the community to support the food bank. Or just this last weekend, we were at Families First, and we were at the Furniture Bank to help with their grand opening. So we're really making an effort to ask the question, what are the good things happening in this city with other organizations, other groups of people, and then how can we come alongside them and bring resources, whether that's people or finances or encouragement. Are you speaking, you're probably speaking more to the building exactly, right?
No, I'm talking about, because the difference between gathering and assembly. So I heard gathering, there's going to be more people coming into the building on regular basis for different things. Pancake breakfast, whatever.
Yeah. So I was part of a church in Northeast Edmonton that sent us out here called Bethel. And so Bethel had English second language classes that it ran. It actually wasn't judo, Brent. It was Taekwondo, a Taekwondo program. It was a hub for the food bank. The food bank would bring food and we put it into hampers and get it ready for people. Churches do a lot of things kind of behind the scenes that really support the whole social fabric of a community. And so we would roll up our sleeves, open the doors, and see how the space could be a blessing, but also how we could be a blessing to whoever in the city.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Abatoye, you're next.
Thank you, Pastor Ryan, for your presentation. Just wanted to ask you this question as the leader of the church. How important is it to you that this is approved? And I just wanted you to say that in 2 or 3 sentences. I just wanted to hear from you as a leader. Thank you.
We've been searching since we signed our lease at the Ross Creek for our next home. We've always assumed that we were going to be successful, that we were going to grow. And so we've been searching for years for a spot. Like I said, we consulted with administration to find a spot. We invested money in Square One. For us, this is the best option. Our lease comes to the end at the end of August. We really love working with Andrew and the group. We like that this is on the south end of town where homes are going to be built. We like that it's going to be across from a school. It's very important to us that this is approved today. If this isn't approved today, this will set us back. It will cost us a lot of money. We'll be back to, unfortunately, not the building, but we'll be back to square one, I guess. So, yeah, this means a lot to our community.
Okay, thank you. That looks like all of the questions. Thank you very much. We are in a public hearing, but we do need a comfort break, as I'm sure lots of people maybe do. It's 3:43, so let's come back for 3:50. That's 7 minutes, so we'll try and go as quickly as possible. So we will recess, and I will just ask everybody, we don't talk about this amongst each other as we are in a public hearing. Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to call the meeting back to order. We are still in a public hearing, so I'm still going to open the floor. If there's anybody else who wishes to come and speak in favor or oppose, this is your time to do so. I'm going to give a second call. Okay, not seeing anybody racing to the podium. Mr. Dance, you're racing. All right, so it looks like that's all for the speaking in favor or opposed. So at this point in time, I will invite administration back. And if there's final questions of administration, this would be your time to ask those. Just give them a second. Councillor Harris.
Mr. Thomas, question. I was trying to understand the clarification on the concept of the node. So at the break, we chatted briefly about that, and you led me to believe that the node, that this site that's under consideration today, is a node in conjunction with other development, like the park and the this and the that, even though that the current zoning on this site is RMM, which is residential, correct?
Through your worship to Councillor Harris, yes, that's correct. So the node is only identified within the municipal development plan. When you get down the hierarchy and get more specific into the area structure plan, then it kind of identifies more specifically where the node would be. And so when you're looking at things like how it's defined and the policies that describe it in more detail, that's where we're looking at, you know, some of the aspects about, you know, not being vehicle orientated, being more walkable, facing the street, having certain orientations, higher quality designs, these kind of things. So Andrew had mentioned, he talked about the location of the node, and that's a very fair comment. In the MDP, we purposely and intentionally didn't want to identify any nodes within the annexation area because we simply wanted planning to happen, and we can actually start to look at some of the area structure plans and have a different conversation about where the nodes and the activity areas, or nodes which are activity areas, actually could be. So there could be a little bit more thought to that. So in terms of in the MDP not being the precise location, the location where it's shown is meant to be somewhat specific, but also somewhat general as well. When you look at the area structure plan and the outline plan, the only place it could be is around this location. It's not meant to be site specific, but it's meant to include an area.
Okay, so when I asked the question earlier, and I'm loath to approve something that creates inconsistency between our planning policies and documents. However, if this passes today, then ultimately what would administration suggest you would bring back to create the harmony and the consistency between our development policies and our development documents, inconsistent with the likely use that will arrive out of approving this today, if that were the case? What would you do?
So, Your Worship, Councillor Harris, I think what would be appropriate is because this would not be congruent with the municipal development plan, in our opinion, okay, we would want to, I guess, take another look at where a node might be or better served. So we are going to be seeing a future area structure plan coming through Strata Developments, and that could be a place where we have a conversation about how that could be incorporated. Mr. Usnick mentioned that a little bit further to the west, there's going to be an intersection there. Maybe there could be a little bit of thought and understanding of what that could look like.
So, suffice to say, we wouldn't create a long-term problem if we approve this today but had the opportunity to create the consistency between our planning documents going forward, which you would see as a valuable exercise, correct?
So, through your worship, Councillor Harris, yes, I do think that it would give us the opportunity to look at doing that planning in the future. The only inconsistency I would see right now, until such time that we would potentially remove that designation, is there could be a conflict that what the Municipal Government Act says is that if you're doing a direct control, it needs to comply with those policies. So, you know, if council believes that it does comply with those policies, I think we would be fine. But if it doesn't, then it would be not congruent until such time we would remove that no designation.
So the last part of the question is, if council passes these bylaws today, then that's council making a statement that it believes there's congruency. Notwithstanding, there might be some technical updating that's required, is what I took you to say earlier.
Through your worship, Councillor Harris, it would be our position that the policies would not be congruent, but if council's will to go ahead with this because it believes it is, then that would be council's decision.
Thank you.
Councillor Blizzard.
So if a business is built on the property, we would get taxes on it, right? But what if that same business rents in the church? Then there's no taxes on it? How does that work?
Through your worship, Councillor Blizzard, I had a conversation with the assessor and I thought I asked him all scenarios, but I didn't actually consider that one. So I'm going to make a bit of an assumption, and I would say, you know, a portion of the building would probably be taxed, but
If they have a business in there.
I believe so.
Okay. And the other thing I asked the developer looking at this, and now I'm going to ask you the same thing, is could this work as a church/residential? I mean, it could be, and I know you said townhouses, could it be some kind of a 2-story or narrow or small apartment, or, you know, because you said this would not work for the node. So if it was, we had some residential, would that make it possibly work?
Through you, your worship, there's a lot of other factors that would be involved. A lot of it does have to do with just how the buildings are oriented and designed towards the street. So it wouldn't just be adding residential to it, but it would really, you would start to get into a little bit more detail. I'm going to defer to Ms. Shindy because I see she's kind of itching to answer the question as well.
Through your worship to Councillor Blizzard, so we have policy that says within the nodes there should be medium and higher density residential form, and that is because when there are people, it helps with the activity vibrancy of the area. So I would say having residential component with the uses that they are proposing, it would help. And as Craig said, it is also important how you are designing your site. So where you are placing the buildings is also important. So all those factors play together.
So how would that be changed on this? So if we approve it the way it is now, it would go ahead the way it is now? Or if they talk to you again, could that be a consideration to have part of it residential?
Through your worship to Councillor Blizzard, if you approve it now, what you are seeing in the direct control, that's what will get developed.
So if we don't approve it, then having some residential would keep it maybe as complying and being a node.
Through your worship to Councillor Blizzard, I think that would be helpful.
Okay, Councillor Kelly, you're next.
Thank you. I'm going to refocus again on essentially the two questions I have. Starting, and it goes back to the first time we talked about this. Is it possible, because it's direct control, to create the district requiring, I don't know, the building permit, and I leave this up to you, to include a sunset clause that says the zoning is good only if you guys build within a specified period of time, and what that is, I don't know. And would it also be possible to approve the motions with the rider that the organization, the group, the prospective purchasers have more discussions with administration around design and materials?
Through your worship, Councillor Kelly, the short answer is yes and no. With respect to your first question, the direct control is the appropriate tool to have a sunset clause. Direct controls have been used in other jurisdictions where a sunset clause has been put in. This situation might be a little bit complicated because we'd have to know specifically what that means, what development means. So is it the commercial portion? Is it the church? Is it both? How much of the site? So where it's been used in Edmonton, for example, around the Arena District, it was fairly specific. And so right now what's before council is a bylaw that's already written, so we would have to do an amendment to it. The second part of your question, I think, would be it would be fairly difficult. Again, I think you would probably have to defer third reading until we came back with some sort of negotiated regulations that could be incorporated.
And you read my mind. That was going to be my second question. Would it make sense that if council has some concerns in that area that we go through second reading but refer third reading back for a follow-up report from administration?
Through your worship, Councillor Kelly, if that would be the will of council, we would be amenable to it.
It's not quite the answer to my question.
Well,
Are you good? Your worship.
I'll take that, but if somebody else in admin can offer some color to that, I would appreciate it as well. Does it make sense is really my very basic question.
Your worship,
could it make sense?
To Councillor Kelly, yes, and we would certainly support having a conversation with the applicant to.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to push your button?
Oh, there we go. Thank you. Through your worship, if I could add, we are definitely open to working with the applicants. I think where Mr. Thomas is pausing is how much you change the bylaw determines whether or not another public hearing is needed. So it's possible. It's just there's extra layers to the process.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Janelle, any exterior construction materials and a sunset clause don't appear to change it much to me. So what would, do you think it's possible that those discussions would require another public hearing? That's really the basis of my question.
Through your worship, the MGA is vague in this area. It would depend on the changes. It's something that we just have to consider.
Okay, Councillor Nguyen, questions?
Yeah, that does answer sort of what my first question was going to be. A second question that I had is, so we're just, the motion as it's written, we're going to be proposing the redistricting of this to direct control. So details, or considering that the applicant developer have expressed flexibility in type of design and whatnot. So but the details of that are not going to be or are going to be subject to your approval. But working with them, there could be a change in the orientation of the building, the architectural type, and so on and so forth. Is that correct? That's how I'm seeing this process go.
Through your worship, Councillor Nguyen, I think because the way the direct control is written, and it does provide architectural drawings in a site plan or an architectural rendering in a site plan, I think we would want to use that as a basis for discussion. I'm not quite sure if I understand your question.
No, I think that's good enough, and that information provides me the clarity that I need to understand it correctly as it's written. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harris.
I don't want to belabor this point, but at page 3 of your report, halfway down, it says opportunities for place of worship. Administration is committed, including a map showing a potential place of worship, which you provided. Then it talks about places of worship as a listed use within 14 districts, including C1 neighborhood, retail, and service district. Refresh my memory. I must be obtuse here, but why did we come up with a direct control district? I understand why those are used more than well, but why that as opposed to rezoning this to a C1 neighborhood, retail, and service? Because then ultimately, the future use could be where the owners, whoever buys the church, subdivides it, sells off a portion for commercial purposes, which would satisfy zoning in C1 neighborhood, retail, and service, correct? And a place of worship in that same zone, a church, would also be a permitted use, correct?
Through your worship, to Councillor Harris, yes. I mean, a C1 and a PS zoning, I think, would probably better fit.
Why did it come forward as?
So the application was for direct control.
So somebody advised the church to apply for that zoning as opposed to sitting down with administration and say, if you want to skin this cat, C1 would be better because it would allow everything and would then not create discontinuity between our planning policies?
Through your worship, Councillor Harris, I think part of the issue too is a C1 and a PS would also not be consistent with, you would be going from the RMM district to C1 and PS. So with this being identified as being the node, we would still have the same concerns. However, it would be, I think, more appropriate zoning given what the purpose of the development is.
Yeah, and I'm not belaboring the point. I'm just trying to understand the generation of, the genesis of where this has come from. So, and we're faced with a direct control district approval at this point. Okay, thank you.
Okay, that looks like all of the questions. So I'm going to close the public hearing at 4:07 p.m. We'll go into business arising from the public hearing. No, they need to speak first.
The motion is that Council give second readings to bylaw C8-23 to amend the Southport Area Structure Plan as written.
Okay, thank you. So we're dealing with the business at hand. I'm going to just double check. Is there any final questions? Not seeing any, then the wish of council. Councillor Nguyen.
Yeah, I'll move that council give second reading to bylaw C8-23 to amend Southport Area Structure Plan bylaw C5-23 to replace a medium density residential designated site along Greenfield link with public services and commercial mixed use on the land use concept plan, revise Appendix A development estimates, and revise the executive summary.
Okay, thank you. I'll accept that motion. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, I think we've had a very wholesome discussion this afternoon. There's a significant amount of thought placed into this development proposal by the applicant and developer. Really, the choice, as I see it, is between a medium density residential, or which we would see in the future for redistricting, or mixed place of worship and commercial space. I do believe this aligns with the core values of our MDP, and looking at this proposal, I think this site and this nodal type of development will serve much more than a place of worship, given the information we've received from the pastor from Brent this afternoon. It'll serve to facilitate a meeting space in the community of Fort Saskatchewan, really with no additional cost to the city. I think as well, this is quite a forward-thinking proposal. It's something that the developer is excited for, and ultimately the developer-driven area structure plan of their neighborhood design. And I think as well we're prudent in approving a proposal of this type, as it incorporates a site that is not yet present in this area. And I think it does elevate the value of the neighborhood and adjacent neighborhoods as well. I think the applicant developer have definitely answered the questions from the concerns of the developer authority. So I'd be happy to support this motion.
Okay, thank you. The motion is now open for discussion and debate. Councillor Harris.
Yeah, I too will support the recommendations put on the floor. I understand it's one of those challenging things to do administratively when you're working with developers and proponents for development in our community, to sometimes get everything so that it can go forward without reservation or problem. If there are some inconsistencies, and that's why I asked that question between our planning documents, if these bylaws are passed, then ultimately I'd be looking for administration to bring that forward so we can create some consistency and make sure that there are no policy deviations. And if it exists for a short period of time, I really don't see that as a negative thing relative to infringing on the Municipal Government Act in any way. I think this is ultimately a council decision based on the future use of land in our community for a good purpose. So I'll support it on that basis.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Yes, thank you. I will support second reading. I'm going to, just a heads up, move to refer third reading, and we'll have a discussion at that time.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion and debate? Okay, I'm going to support second reading too. I do believe it's concurrent with the MDP. I know there's some splitting of hairs when it comes to assembly, to gathering, to this node, to that node. And I just think it's just, we're not communicating the same when we're talking sometimes between planning and council. And what I see is we're going to have something coming forward within the next 2 to 3 years for area structure plan across the road. And I think, when we know we're potentially going to have a school of 1,400 that's across from there, there's probably lots of opportunities to provide for even spaces for different things that'll be happening in that area. So for me, I personally believe it's concurrent or congruent or whatever your word is. And I just think we're just speaking differently. That's all. Anybody else on second reading? Oh, Councillor Abatoye, go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you. I would also support the motion. I believe that the church actually in this location adds a lot of value to that area and also to the community. As a member of a church myself, I know how difficult it is to raise funds, and I think this church had done great work to be able to get to this point, and I think that it's important for the city to support them. And as we've heard also from the applicants, they've talked about, their willingness to, work with administration to find ways to align, everything. And finally, I think Mr. Thomas said, if council believes that, the policies are aligned, then I guess it does. And so I support the motion. I think we can move forward with it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further discussion and debate on second? If not, I'll go to Councillor Nguyen to close.
Yeah, nothing further on close. I support the comments made by the council.
Okay, thank you. The motion is now closed for second reading. Please cast your vote. That is carried. Did you want to continue on with third?
Yeah, I can make third reading. So I'll move that council approve. Sorry, I lost it here. that council gives third reading to bylaw C2823 to amend South Fort Area Structure Plan bylaw C523 to replace a medium density residential designated site located along Greenfield Link with public services and commercial mixed use on the land use concept plan, revise Appendix A, development estimates, and revise the executive summary.
Okay, thank you. Do you wish to speak to third reading?
Not at the moment. I'll wait for the referral motion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kelly.
I'm prepared to make the referral now, Mayor Katcher, but that only assumes that nobody else wants to comment until I do.
I'm not seeing anybody else weighing in on discussion, so you go ahead and make a motion.
You bet, thank you. And help me with the wording here, administration, if I stumble. I move that third reading of bylaw C823 be referred back to administration. Administration then to continue discussions with the prospective purchaser with the objective of negotiating a reasonable sunset clause for development and further discussions on exterior finishings and design, and perhaps bring a brief report back or third reading back to council and when that's ready, and hopefully not too long in the future.
Process-wise, Mr. Kaiser, do you need a timeline on that?
Yes, thank you. I'm just drafting the motion, but a timeline would be helpful. I'm not sure if planning has any ideas on time constraints, but
this might be a stretch, but we might look to some of the people that spoke today to see if they have an opinion on timing as well.
we're thinking that before the end of Q4 of this year would be possible, given the request.
And I'll look for a nod up in the back corner. At the end of calendar year 23, you guys are prepared to meet and have some discussions? We're not having them today, no, sorry. Anyway, if it seems to be generally amenable, Mayor Katcher, so I'll stick with the motion. And in terms of speaking toward it or for it, I don't think there's any intent from the group that's here to delay construction. And I'm not suggesting that there is. It's just that the world has a sometimes surprising way of getting in your space. And we have, and I live fairly close to the proposed church site in South Fort, and it's sat empty for a very long time and no sign of movement. And I actually find that unfortunate. I really do. As far as the building materials, you folks wouldn't be aware, but I'm going to go back in history half a dozen years. In 2017, there were 5 new councillors elected to council. Administration, to their credit, arranged some discussion periods or seminar type days, and one in particular down at River's Edge with a gentleman, Mr. Thomas, you were there, and I forget the guy's name, but he's a city planner with experience and architect, I assume, I don't know, but he came to town, and it wasn't his first visit to town, and he gave the council of the day some comments on how to make our town look better. And it's just that. We're not saying that everybody has to add 50% of the budget, at least I'm not, 50% of the budget to make a more expensive building. But there are things that can happen within a design context and a finishing material context that I think are somewhat elucidated within our municipal development plan. And all of that municipal development plan, by the way, those changes stemmed from meetings like that we had 6 years ago, almost 5.5 years ago, and it is something that I believe in. So within reason. Not trying to hold you guys. I know budget is always an issue, but we're building a structure that you want to be a focal point for the community. I would like it to be a focal point for the community as well. So let's keep that in mind and see if we can't bring something back.
Okay, I'm just going to have you read that. Sorry, I took you off.
Could I just?
Okay, just go ahead.
And you did a great job. I wonder if it would make sense to say in the second line there, as well as the exterior finishing. I'm not into the construction part of it. That wasn't my intent. I'm not an engineer, but finishings and design or appearance, would that make more sense, Mr. Thomas?
I didn't bring my glasses, so I'm kind of struggling to read it. I think that could be incorporated, and I think it would make sense. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Minor change, please, Andrew.
We'll just give Andrew a second.
Sure, I'm just moving us into the more live editing view here to make sure that this reflects your intent.
Okay, I'm happy with that if everybody else is, if it's workable
Okay.
for administration.
Okay, and you've spoken in favor of it, so I'll open it up for discussion and debate. Councillor Harris?
I appreciate the intent of what Councillor Kelly's trying to accomplish. Obviously, we don't want a white elephant. We don't want a development that ultimately is not consistent with the amenities of the neighborhood. That's ultimately contrary to good planning. However, I do not believe that sunset clauses are ultimately enforceable. And administration may want to provide a comment to that, but it would be my understanding that you can put a sunset clause in. But ultimately, if the group that this is subject to the sunset clause decides to go like this, ultimately it then becomes a very significant legal issue, and that parties get drawn into an interpretation of things. The other thing that I look at here is there's subjectivity in here, exterior finishings and design. I'm not sure who's qualified to provide and render commentary on exterior finishings and design, but and there's no specificity as to what that really means. And I understand our administration ultimately has to do that from time to time. But I see this motion as very problematic. And unfortunately, even though I understand where you're going, Councillor Kelly, I really can't support it because of those comments.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Blizzard on discussion and debate.
Yeah, I'm also not going to support it. I think we did have members of the church up here reassuring us, and it is a church, so we're going to take I'm going to take your word at it, that you've heard many comments now that the first sketch wasn't so enticing, let's say, or so maybe just go back no matter what and look at it. I think you guys want to be proud of your building, so if it gets built, we do want something that enhances the community, so maybe have a big discussion and see what works the best.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Nguyen.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with the last two comments. I fully appreciate the intent of this. I don't think there is an extreme amount of value referring this back to administration to come back to council for things like exterior finishings and designs. That's going to be a process through the construction design phase, drawing phase of this project. That is for in the foreseeable future, but I don't think those are details that are necessary at this phase of the proposal. So for that reason, I'm not going to support the motion.
Okay, thank you. I'm not going to support the motion either. I agree with Councillor Harris. I think sunset clauses can be put on city property if we own them, that if somebody doesn't do what they were committed to do within that time frame, we can take it back. But I think when it's private development and private buyers, I think that's very difficult for us to get involved in that. And I don't think we really, within the land use bylaw, it really talks about what type of finishes should be allowed or shouldn't be allowed. So I think for us to put a higher standard on somebody else, it doesn't make sense to me. So I will not be supporting the referral motion. Anybody else on discussion and debate? Not seeing any. Councillor Kelly, on your referral motion?
Yeah, you bet. Thank you. I'm not going to waste a lot of time on it. I understand the concerns re the finishing is in design. The sunset clause, I don't see it as being a problem. But nobody up here is a lawyer. I'll leave it at that, Mayor Catcher. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So you're voting on the referral motion only at this point in time as presented. Please cast your vote. Motion is defeated, 5-1. So we'll go back to the main motion, which was Councillor Nguyen's motion for third reading, which you've already read in. So that is open for any further discussion and debate. Not seeing any. Anything on close, Councillor Nguyen? You're good. So I'm going to close the motion for third reading. Please cast your vote. Who are we?
Councillor Abatoye.
Councillor Abatoye, are you there? Can you cast your vote? No? Oh, okay. And that is carried. Thank you. All right, would somebody else like to do, let's see, we got motion number 3 on the outline plan. Would somebody else like to do that? Councillor Harris?
I would be pleased that council, or I would move that council approve amendments to the South Fort Ridge Meadows outline plan as presented in the administrative report.
All right, thank you. Would you like to speak to your motion?
You know, we've had a good, as you've indicated, a good discussion on this thing, and ultimately I would like to ensure that our policies and our bylaws are consistent with one another. And if we've created something that's a little bit unique in this situation, so be it. But ultimately, in this case, I see this as just a normal recommendation to bring forward to deal with this particular aspect of our policy framework. So I'll support it in that regard.
Okay, thank you. Discussion and debate? Not seeing or hearing anybody. I'll go to close.
Nothing more.
Nothing on close. The motion is now closed. Please cast your vote. Councillor Abatoye? Councillor Abatoye, are you there to vote? Oh. And that is carried. All right. Thank you very much. Okay, we're moving on to motion number 4. Councillor Blizzard, do you want to do? Okay, that's yours. Go ahead.
I'll make a motion that council gives second reading to bylaw C9-23 to amend land use bylaw C23-20 as presented.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll accept the motion. Do you wish to speak to it?
Nope, I think that's a continuation of what's been happening here.
All right, thank you very much. So this is second reading of bylaw C9-23. It's open for discussion and debate. Not seeing or hearing anything on close?
No.
Thank you. The motion is now closed. Please cast your vote. That is carried. And do you wish to continue? Just push your button, sorry. Go ahead.
I'll make a motion. Oh, are we going to third reading?
Yeah, that was second.
Okay, sorry. I'll make a motion that council gives third reading to bylaw C9-23 to amend land use bylaw C23-20 as presented.
Thank you. Do you speak in favor?
No.
Anything on discussion and debate? Not seeing any. Anything on close?
No.
Motion is now closed. Please cast your vote. And that is carried. All right. Thank you very much. So the time is 4:29. I think we're going to take a 15-minute break and actually have a little break. Pardon? Okay. Pardon? What? That'll be we've got the triannual report. So we are on recess till 4:45. Wait. Okay, we will resume the meeting, and the next item is 8.1, Bylaw C10-23, Business License Bylaw. Aaron Brush Duncan presenting.
Helps if you turn the microphone on. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me back today. I'm Aaron Brush Duncan, Director of Economic Development. The purpose of this presentation is to provide Council with information regarding the proposed bylaw C10-23, which replaces Business License Bylaw C20-22. Bylaw C10-23 removes redundancy from the existing business license bylaw by eliminating the temporary business licenses, an underutilized option, as well as adding clarity to the valid terms of business licenses. Just a quick background on the business license bylaw. I guess you can see a little bit more of the previous background from 2005 and 2016. In 2005, Council adopted Bylaw C20-05, which required businesses to obtain a business license. And in 2016, Council adopted Bylaw C9-16, which updated and refreshed the original business license bylaw. Then in January to March of 2021, administration began a 5-year review of Bylaw C9-16 to improve clarity and efficiency. This process included consultation with the business community as well as other city departments to identify potential improvements to the bylaw. This feedback was gathered to and incorporated into the business license bylaw C20-22. On June 14th, Council passed that bylaw, which introduced seasonal business licenses. And then on October 10th of 2023, administration proposed business license bylaw C10-23 to replace the business license bylaw, and Council requested administration to review and clarify the term definitions for business licenses and return to Council. Just to review, there are 3 current terms in the business license bylaw. The first one is the temporary business license, which has a valid term of 28 days. And then you have the seasonal business license. There's both a resident and a non-resident type of seasonal business license. Those have a valid term of 120 days. And then you have kind of the standard business license, both a resident and non-resident, and that is valid until the end of the calendar year. So just to go over the key changes that are being proposed. So seasonal business licenses were introduced in 2022 to meet the needs of businesses that were not wanting the full year license, but needed a business license valid for more than those 28 days. And seasonal business licenses are valid for 120 days, providing more time for businesses to complete their work. Examples of businesses that may opt for seasonal business licenses include landscaping, snow clearing, construction, tutoring, etc. Following the introduction of the seasonal business license, the temporary business license option became redundant. Removing the temporary business licenses will streamline the options for businesses and administration. Temporary business licenses can be eliminated with the removal of 6A within business license bylaw C20-22, as shown here. The secondary key change was made in response to some feedback from Council from that October 10th meeting. So additionally, a need to clarify the valid terms of business licenses was identified. To address this need, provision 6B has been amended to clarify that the end of the year expiration date does not apply to seasonal business licenses. To quickly go over this potential impact for businesses, the 2023 and proposed 2024 fees for resident seasonal business licenses are less than temporary business licenses, and the impact to business license revenue from the removal of the temporary business license is expected to be negligible, as businesses will be transitioned to seasonal business licenses. So like I said, the 2023 and proposed 2024 fees for residential seasonal business licenses are less than temporary business licenses. The non-resident seasonal business license holders will experience a slight increase in business license fees compared to the temporary business license. So you can kind of see in this chart here that a seasonal business license is less expensive than a temporary business license if you're a resident, but a seasonal business license is more expensive than a temporary business license if you're a non-resident. The valid term for a seasonal business license is 92 days longer than a temporary business license, which, as I mentioned before, allows businesses ample time to complete work, to go through a permitting process, etc. And just to note, as of yesterday, we have had 45 temporary business licenses this year, and those business licenses, if they were interested in getting a business license next year, would need to be shifted to a seasonal business license. And regarding communicating this to businesses, so should the business license bylaw C10-23 be approved, economic development will communicate to the business community about the change through multiple methods of communication, including the city's website, social media, and e-newsletters. The recommendation from administration is that administration requests council to proceed with 3 readings of business license bylaw C10-23, replacing business license bylaw C20-22.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go to any questions anyone may have. So I've got one question. So it's basically an honor system, though, I assume, given that you get 120 days and bylaw is not going to go out and chase them?
To your worship, yes, typically anytime there is, I guess a lot of the enforcement comes through kind of a complaint basis. So it is a bit of an honor system currently, or if a complaint is received.
Okay. So my next question, have we actually issued any tags or fines from bylaw for anybody who's non-compliant? Do we know that?
Through your worship, I am aware that one has been issued.
One. Okay. Okay, thank you. Councillor Abatoye, questions?
Thank you for your question, for your presentation, Erin. I'm just curious. So the non-residents license is 3 times residents. So is it the same thing for just regular license? What will be the cost for business licenses for residents versus non-residents? And that's, I'm talking about not the seasonal one, just the regular one.
Through your worship, to Councillor Abatoye, our seasonal business licenses are 50% of the cost of regular licenses for both resident and non-resident.
Okay. So it will be 3 times as well, even for the regular business licenses.
Approximately, yes.
About 3 times. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nguyen.
I'm just trying to remember my question. Is there a public list of all businesses licensed in Fort Saskatchewan that are seasonal or will be seasonal, I guess, or temporary? Sorry.
Through your worship, to Councillor Nguyen, Economic Development has a business directory that does share the business licenses for businesses that have elected to do that, and that that list is updated through the business licensing process.
Excellent. And you're going to be obviously emailing businesses who have pulled out a seasonal business, or sorry, a temporary business license. I'm getting these backwards, and introducing to the seasonal business license, I would assume.
Through your worship, to Councillor Nguyen, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There doesn't appear to be any further questions on this. What is the wish of council? Councillor Harris.
I would move that council give first reading of bylaw C10-23, which replaces the current business license bylaw C20-22.
Thank you. Do you wish to speak in favor?
I think we had a good discussion at the last meeting and whenever we last did that. And I think I understand the nature of what we're trying to achieve, so I support it.
Okay, thank you. The motion is open for discussion and debate. Not seeing anything on close? Okay, I'm going to close the motion for first reading. Please cast your vote. That is carried. You can continue on.
No, somebody else can make the motion.
Okay. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. I move the council gives second reading to bylaws C10-23, which replaces the current business license bylaws C20-22.
Thank you. Do you wish to speak to it?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion and debate? Not seeing anything on close?
Nothing, thank you.
Thank you. The motion is now closed. Please cast your vote. That is carried. Would you like to present it for unanimous consent?
Sure. I move the council give unanimous consent to proceed, I had to expand this, to proceed to third reading by bylaws C10-23, which replaces the current business bylaws C20-22.
Thank you. Do you have anything further to speak in favor?
Nothing, thank you.
All right. Anything on discussion and debate? Oh, this is consent. I'm sorry. Close the motion. Please cast your vote. That is carried. Did you want to do third?
Sure. I move the council give third reading to bylaws C10-23, which replaces the current business license bylaws C20-22.
Thank you. Anything to speak in favor?
Nothing further, thank you.
Okay. Anything on discussion and debate? Not seeing any. Anything on close?
Nothing, thank you.
All right. The motion is now closed. Please cast your vote. And that is carried. Thank you very much. All right, we're going to move right along to the 9.1 May through August Triannual Management Financial Report. Clayton Northey and Colleen Wagner.
All right, I think I'm on. Good afternoon, Your Worship and members of council. My name is Colleen Wagner and I'm the senior accountant with the City of Fort Saskatchewan. And today, along with Clayton Northey, I will present the August 31st, 2023 interim report.
Maybe just move the mic a little closer.
A little closer?
There you go.
All right. So first, we're going to kind of just go over some of the operating highlights for the first 8 months of 2023. So of course, we are currently in the construction of our JRC 2-year modernization project. Also, with the direct water supply functional planning study, we received a $200,000 grant funding through an Alberta Community Partnership grant. During the first 8 months of the year, the Truth and Reconciliation events with the Treaty 6 and Métis Nation of Alberta included a flag raising, mural, and several celebration and awareness events. Various studies and plans were approved during the first 8 months of the year. This included the Indoor Recreational Phase 2 study was presented and approval was given to proceed with Phase 3. Fire Services Master Plan was approved and the RCMP Annual Policing Plan setting out strategic priorities for April 2023 to March 2024 was approved. Continued work on the Vision Zero plan saw upgraded 7 crosswalks with flashing pedestrian crossing light standards, and the Downtown Action Plan saw 2 parklets reinstalled, 2 new murals, and new street banners. Moving on to operations. At August 31st, the city is forecasting an $806,000 deficit. Included in this deficit is a $1.244 million deficit for municipal operations and a $438,000 surplus for utility operations. Revenues are expected to be $163K higher than budgeted for 2023. The revenue's biggest variances to budget were the investment income because of higher than expected balances and higher yields. And fines and penalties are lower due to changeover in the automated traffic service provider and offset by lower than service maintenance contract expenses. The operating expenses, as you can see on the slide, are forecasted to be $1.566 million above budget for the year. Some of the surpluses in the expenses were the service maintenance contracts. Again, that is the surplus due to the automated traffic enforcement ticketing. Other expenses was a budget placeholder for the 2023 tax assessment growth revenue. Contracted services in this area, consulting, had the largest variance with budget, and that was due to one-time reserve and grant-funded projects and an unexpected increased cost on traffic signal maintenance and repairs. Salary, wages, and benefits were above budget due to additional firefighters, which has been covered by the 2023 tax assessment growth funds. Project positions for temporary staff, which are be offset by reserve and grant funding, staff turnover, vacancies, and leave coverage. Purchases from other governments was over budget due to policing services higher staffing costs and increases in indirect costs. The variance in the other section of $597,000 was relate to increased reserve transfers due to our higher investment income yields for interest-bearing reserves, the allocation of the 2023 tax assessment growth revenue, and projects carried over from 2022. Okay, capital program. So in 2023, the capital program included 11 new projects for the year and 32 multi-year projects carried forward from 2022. At August 31st, the city had completed 13 projects, 28 were still in progress, 2 were on hold, and 2 for the Veterans Way projects were cancelled. As you can see on the slide, the city spent $9.857 million on capital expenditures in the first 8 months of 2023, and we expect to spend $34.061 million to complete the existing projects. Project overages during the first 8 months for the City Hall space development. This will be funded by additional ISIP grant funding. The asset management and South Meadows amenity overages will be funded by various project surpluses. The financial position. So as shown on Appendix 1, highlights of the changes in the city's financial position during the first 8 months of 2023 include a net increase in the city's net financial assets of $21.9 million compared to December 2022. This increase is due to the 2023 property taxes being levied. Investments decreased $12 million as the city drew down on its short-term portfolio. Trade payables increased due to capital project invoicing during the construction season in the first 8 months of the year. Financial reserves. So Appendix 1 includes a summary of the city's financial reserve balances, commitments, and optimal balances. At August 31st, 2023, the city had a $71.779 million balance in financial reserve. Of this balance, 22.518 is committed funds and 49.655 million is uncommitted. And the city's total optimal balance for 2023 is 47.856 million. As shown on the chart, you can see that the top 2 projects are under the optimal balance. The stabilization and contingency reserves are 3.698 million below the optimal balance. The project reserves are 3.03 million below. The remaining 3 reserves are over the optimal balance. So infrastructure lifecycle reserves is 13,000 over. Specific purpose reserves were 1.445 million and restricted reserves are over by 526,000. this concludes my presentation, and Clayton and myself are happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Harris, you're first.
On the last point about the optimal balance on the reserves, refresh my memory as to how we calculate optimal balances on any of our reserves. It's been a while since I had that primer, so just a couple of words on that context.
Through your worship to Councillor Harris, the optimal balance, it depends on the specific reserve. Most of our life cycle infrastructure reserves are now, with the new policy that was approved in the spring, are now on essentially their replacement, years to replacement, and replacement value are the key drivers there. So essentially that by the time we go to replace vehicles, mobile equipment, various equipment that we have in the city, we will have enough money to replace it as what the target.
Okay, thanks. So the stabilization and contingency reserve, which is under the optimal balance, ultimately that's kind of like a good planning kind of thing, just in case.
Yeah,
insurance policy.
The stabilization and contingency is set based on the largest portion of that is set on 2 months worth of operating expenses. There's also a portion that's based on specific to snow removal that I don't remember the specific formula, but and then we have capital projects reserves. All our project reserves are set based on expected future use and historic spending from those reserves.
Good, thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Abatoye.
Thank you for your presentation. Just 2 quick questions. So when you're talking about one of the bigger variances on the reports, the transfer to organizations and individuals, I'm not sure if I missed that, but what's the reason for that variance? It's over $1 million.
Your worship, through to Councillor Abatoye. So the biggest contributor to the transfer from reserves was our contribution to the pedestrian bridge, and that was $1 million, and that was a project from 2022.
No, my question is about transfers to organizations and individuals, not transfer to reserves. There's a variance of 1.1 for as it's August 31st.
Sorry, it's the same answer. Transfer to organization was our contribution for the pedestrian bridge. Sorry, my apologies.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, no worries. Thank you. Just my second question was to your presentation slides under capital programs. So under recreation services, you have $19.7 million for forecast remaining expenditure. I'm just wondering what projects will that be? Or what projects would that be under rec services?
Through your worship to Councillor Abatoye, that the largest piece of that is the Jubilee Rec Center modernization. That's just shy of 17 million, I believe, right now. Others would be, I believe there's some trails or some outdoor amenities like the new South Fort park amenity, and Southport Park amenity is the biggest piece that's left other than that, and there's a holdover from for River Valley Trail System, which I believe is being incorporated into the from 2014 that I believe is being incorporated into the Fort Center Park project now.
Thank you. So just my final question. So these are funds that are going to be, that's planned to be spent within this budget year. Am I correct?
Through your worship to Councillor Abatoye, that's the forecast expenditure to complete the projects, not to complete the project.
Okay, perfect. All right, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Blizzard.
So, and maybe help me understand this. So every year I always think the last number of years we've had a big surplus, and it goes in the paper, and councils, approved all this, and then we really didn't need it, and taxes went up. So this year we actually have a deficit. So number one, where does the money come from? And I heard you say something about in some projects as overages, and so we can kind of balance it, but we're still down overall. So where does that money come from? And what happens like going forward? I mean, I don't want to see a deficit every year. That would be not good.
Through your worship, Councillor Blizzard, the money is coming from in this year. Will have to come out of the financial stabilization fund. That's the purpose of that fund. That's why it's important to keep it fully funded in case we have years like this. But then the other key piece on this one, where does it? Sorry, can you repeat the second part of your question?
How do we prevent it going forward? I mean, I get it. We adjust the numbers, but we don't always know. But do we have, overestimate? I get budgeting's not easy. But
so through your worship to Councillor Blizzard, the largest variances this year really relate to things like the slowdown in automated traffic enforcement, the RCMP contract. Coming in over budget. I know in the RCMP budget, there is an adjustment coming in the 2024 budget to reflect what we're going through and reflect their multi-year fiscal plan, which I believe was previously presented to council. Court fines we are expecting to normalize now that we have the new provider in place and operating. And then we have a lot of the other variances are your normal churn, things like that are in the system that would normally be accounted for.
Okay. I have a couple more. I'll go around next.
Yeah, I'll put Sean round too. Okay. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Kelly.
You bet. Thank you. I'd just like to refer you to page 13 of your update. It's 141 of the council package. It's a comparative balance sheet. I'm sure there's a great answer. I just noticed the difference in the handling of investments between August of 22 and August of 23, where in August of 22 we had close to 92 million in investments and 13 million in cash, and we've now almost balanced that out, 59 versus 46 in cash. Any reason for that, please?
Through your worship, Councillor Kelly, really has to do with the investments that are available, both the deposit accounts that we have available to us at any given time between those two. So we are constantly monitoring on our short-term investment portfolio where the right place to have those funds is. We are also in the process of doing a review of our investment provider to look at how we can make best use of our funds over the long term. So we do have an open RFP right now for investment advisory services. So there is some consideration for making sure that we have the availability to move funds.
Okay, so if I were to summarize, it would be just the effect of a changing interest rate environment?
Through your worship, Councillor Kelly, that would be correct.
Thank you. One page further down, statement of operations broke into departments. I don't want to go into the details. I just noticed that the department totals, the expenses for department totals, when we look at August 31, 22 actuals versus August 23 actuals, pretty much every department is up, and that would get us to the $1 million deficit that you're forecasting for the end of the year. We have to build into the 24 budget the deficit from 23, plus presumably an operating or inflationary impact over and above the deficit to bring us to break even for 24. So any hazard on what you guys are looking at for increases in tax revenue going in the next budget?
Through your worship to Councillor Kelly, I'm going to pass that one on to Mr. Dance.
I thought you might.
I do know that they're working feverishly to finalize that budget, though.
Yeah.
Mr. Fleming?
You've had an update since I have.
Yeah. So through your worship, the last update I've had, and it's been a few weeks, and as they work through it, things change. So the number might be different than what I was last told, but the way the budget looks right now, it could be somewhere in the neighborhood of about 5.5% property tax increase. That's call that a draft, like a projected. The one, I don't call it a caveat, I guess, but one thing to consider with that is that that doesn't include the fact that the DCC debenture is no longer a part of the budget. So we'll be bringing it in and reporting, and it could say something like a 5.5% property tax increase, but there is actually about a 2% property tax reduction for the citizens as a result of that debenture falling off. So it doesn't become part of the reported number, but it is in fact, it comes out of the revenues and the expenses side of the budget. So it just disappears for the citizens. But yeah, property tax increase could be, it was above 5 the last time we went through. And the RCMP contract was a big contributor. The adjustments we have to make, which is why we had the RCMP here a few weeks ago to talk about their budget. And then a lot of inflation. And then the impact of the DCC, the aquatics debenture to start the detailed design process is still included. And obviously there's a few other things in there as well that we'll go through at the time.
You bet. It's kind of what I was expecting, unfortunately, Troy, but thank you. Appreciate it. And that's all my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nguyen.
Yeah, thanks. Just a question. This might be for Corinne. I see she came because of anticipating this. I'm not sure if it is or not. But just to the traffic or photo traffic enforcement, are we being given projections? Because obviously we're quite a bit different than we thought we would be, and that wasn't accounted for in last year's budget operationally. So what are they using to project what 2024 is going to look like, and what assurance do we have of some revenue? And maybe you can speak to what that could look like.
Certainly, Your Worship, through to Councillor Nguyen. Essentially, we did have a 6-month delay in the transfer of the contract providers. This delay was due to a provincial approval process through Service Alberta, where the contractor had applied to get motor vehicle information, and there was a 6-month delay due to the provincial election, and then just some problems that the new contractor had. So our projections, it's really early stages. We just started operating on September the 11th. So I have only 1 month worth of data, and it's hard for me to project out. There's so many different variables, but things are looking good. Our cameras are really showing nice photos and videos, and things are working well so far. So once I get more data, I can start doing better projections in that regard.
Yeah, that's fair, and I appreciate the complexity of making this kind of projection, as well as the data that we had from before was based on cameras that weren't fully functional. So I guess we'll see that in the operations budget. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. I'm next. So I guess the question that I have, we have a budget. So we're going through the year, we see we're not getting the revenues. So I guess the question that I have, I don't know whether it's to you or to Mr. Fleming. So as we start seeing that there's a deficit starting to build, what steps were taken to adjust anything that we maybe wouldn't have a deficit? Because we shouldn't always just be relying on the financial stabilization reserve. Normal households don't. So Mr. Fleming? What steps?
Through Your Worship, that's a good point. I don't have any like a distinct list I can give, but we have had these conversations. Once we start getting indications that we're over budget, I have to give the worst bureaucratic answer ever, but there is a bit of an it depends. So it depends on what the variances are and what's causing them. So obviously with the photo enforcement as the recent example, we work to get that system going, and that sort of stops the bleeding, I guess, so to speak, on something like that. With the RCMP, I mean, I try to be cautious when we go into sort of heavy cost saving mode, because if you look at what we did over COVID, I mean, that's what it takes for us to turn around and try to save $1 million or a couple $1 million, right? There's significant service level impacts. So when the RCMP contract is running over, we monitor it. We get an explanation. but for the most part, that's a variance that we will just allow to continue to go because we didn't think it was wise to change those service levels. We will look to do other little things along the way. We may tell staff to throttle back on courses and conferences, or we may look at delaying some work on things like facilities and maintenance and whatnot, and sort of defer those into the new year. But again, I'm cautious to do those things if I think it's going to just set us behind, and then we spend the next year catching up and the next year after that. So we monitor these very carefully, and we're cognizant of what they are. But in terms of what steps we take, I would say there's little things we can do, but in a lot of ways, in order to maintain our service levels, there's not a lot that I've done at this point for this particular budget year.
So then I guess my next question is, should it not have been brought to council earlier to say maybe we need to cut back on something, you know, whether it's facility related or, you know, anything? Because at the end of the day, we're going to have to approve funding coming from the Financial Stabilization Reserve. And it just feels like it's, to me, like, you know, if council isn't making these decisions, this falls on you to say, well, okay, council, you know, like, you're just, trust me, I'm just going to ask for the money later. You know, like, I feel like the question is why weren't we actually maybe involved in this a little bit sooner to maybe have some service level changes or some changes in some maybe future capital operating monies and stuff like that?
Yeah, through your worship, we can certainly look at doing that in a future year. About you know, when we change to the T3 or the three trimester system, it does create an interesting dynamic, because we used to have that T2 report at the halfway point of the year, where I would actually say it probably would have been easier to course correct at that point. But what happens now is you get the T1 report, and then you don't get anything until now, and so we sort of miss that mid-year opportunity we might have had to have before. I think that's what I struggle with when I look at this. Is, I mean, I've only had this information myself for a little over a week now, so there's not a lot you can do. Like I said, without having significant service level changes, which is certainly something we could do. So I would probably have to take that as feedback and look at it for something for a future year.
Okay. Round two, Councillor Blizzard.
I've got a few, but I'm going to start with this. So why do we do, if it's so hard, T1, 2, and 3 versus 4 quarters?
Through your worship, the timing of this actually works out better for council in a sense, because you get this T2 report right before you head into the annual budget process, and that was one of the advantages. Excuse me. And the other advantage is that it knocked an entire reporting cycle out, which was more efficient for staff and for council. I would say that the T1 report wasn't providing a lot of value under the old system. It was just too early. So
okay. And I have a couple more questions. One I'm going to lump because there's kind of 3 altogether. There was a loader with bucket, a concrete, a planer drum, and then the transfer station site enhancement all went over budget. Even the South Fort Meadows. So when we buy something or when we're doing a project, who decides? And that's going to affect, you know, the budget. Who decides, oh, we'll just throw in another extra $500,000? Did it come to council? I don't even remember that. And that's a significant amount. Same with the transfer station. Not that they're not necessary, but you know, that's quite a bit over. And same with buying the loader bucket. It was, I think, 60,000. I just had it up here. It was a chunk more, you know, and they just go, like, if I need a new car, my budget is 20,000. I try to stick to it. But sometimes you see one for 26 you really like.
To your question. Your question, so they can answer it.
Well, that is the question. How do we, you know, how is that dealt with? How do they just go ahead and spend the money when it's well over budget?
So, through your worship, the answer to that question is within the city's, the council approved budget policy, and I think there might also be a reference to it in the city manager's bylaw. We do have the opportunity, or under my authority, we have the opportunity to reallocate. In this case, the examples you used, we can reallocate within the capital budget. So if a couple of projects are under and a couple of projects are over, we can reallocate from the over projects to the under projects. I don't have the ability to increase the size of the capital budget envelope, but I do have the ability to reallocate from one project to another. And I think there's a lot of value in that, A, just for the sake of efficiency, because it's just quicker for us to continue to do business that way. And B, it encourages us to be more realistic with our budget projections for projects, because if we didn't have the ability to reallocate and staff had to consistently come back on a project by project basis, I know what would happen. They would start to very generously estimate the amount of their project budgets, right? So this way it lets us be a little bit more accurate and realistic, and then we deal with the variances as they come in.
Thanks. That's what I was looking for, some education. I have one more, but I can wait. Or
just one?
Yep.
Okay.
And this is more with, I think it's on page 34 of the budget, and it was on various businesses. So I think Erin is still here, that got some money. And it looks like a lot of them were like, we approved 50%, some weren't, but there's some that look like they're fully funded by us. Is there not a limit, or do they have a bigger project and we just, they have more that we're not seeing? Like, to me, a business should have a vested interest in when they get a grant, if they apply, if it's a $500 or $5,000 project, that they wouldn't get everything from us, because then why wouldn't they just put in a pile of projects?
Can you find that?
It's page business support, page 34. I'm thinking it deals with economic development.
Yeah, so this is through our business support program, where the maximum that they can receive is 65% of the total project costs.
Oh, it just says estimated project cost and then incentive approved, and some of them are the same. So maybe there's something missing then?
Okay, thank you for pointing that out. It looks like there may be an error in that estimated project cost column.
Okay, I was just curious because I thought it shouldn't be fully funded. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. Seems like every year we talk about traffic fines or ISD fines and how our revenues are down or our revenues are up from them. What would it take, Mr. Fleming, to remove the revenue discussion from the fines? I've had citizens tell me that we ought not to be in the business of collecting fines. And I think the point is clear. It's supposed to be a safety issue, an enforcement issue, not a revenue issue. And I don't need an answer today. I'd really like, though, to stop the discussion when we get to budgets about how much the drop in fines revenue affects our property taxes. And maybe one thing we could do is to throw the fines revenue into the stabilization reserve and adjust the annual increase to the stabilization reserve 1 year to accommodate that. And for henceforth, the revenue goes into the stabilization reserve, and we don't ever talk about fines revenue on the actual income statement. It doesn't sit well with me. Any thoughts on that or comments? And that's a long question. Thank you, Mayor
Mr. Fleming.
Yeah, through your worship, I would love to do that. So I inherited the budget, not blaming anyone for sure in the past, but just the budget that I inherited 6.5 years ago when I got this job was that it had the revenue built in as a general revenue. And so in an ideal world, because of the way, I don't know if it's risk associated with it, but because of the variance that we've seen in that revenue source over the year, because it has gone up and down a lot because of various different reasons, it would be ideal if that money was just contributed to a reserve and used to contribute back to things like traffic calming and traffic safety and the like. But it takes either you can do it over the period of years, or you could do it, like you said, in 1 year and you just bite the bullet, because there would be an associated property tax increase barring changes on the expense side of the ledger in order to accomplish that. And why haven't I brought that forward or proposed it in the past is really because for me, I've had higher priorities, getting the MSI money out of the neighborhood rehab and now trying to get it out of the road rehab along with all the other regular business that comes our way. It just hasn't been something that I've prioritized high enough to actually start to put it into the property tax impact. So that's the simplest answer.
And I'll bring it up during budget and maybe during our strat plan session as well, so it doesn't get forgotten. One more question, if I may, Mayor Katcher.
Okay.
I didn't have it until Mr. Fleming just spoke. MSI money, I have similar concerns with the handling of that as well. There are some general parameters that the provincial government, this is my understanding, general parameters that the provincial government gives us when we receive our MSI funding, that it be spent on certain types of things, broadcast, but certain types of things. To me, that's a reporting to the provincial government. We met our requirements, thank you. But the MSI is, to me, not a funding for a specific project. Because I've had discussions with citizens about the football field got funded out of MSI. It didn't cost the taxpayers anything. That's been actual discussions. Well, in actual fact, it did cost the taxpayers because the MSI goes into our bank account. So could we have the same discussion around MSI? And I know I'm rattling on. How do we change this dynamic so that we don't talk about MSI funding for specific projects? MSI is a revenue line.
Mr. Fleming?
Through your worship, you'll have to let me think about that. I do agree with you that maybe there's an education component to it, that the MSI money, it is an opportunity cost in a sense, right? Because you can use it for something and it is an outside funding source, but you'd have to let me think about that in terms of how we position it. I do think it's worthwhile to be careful with what projects you apply it to. I like the idea better of not having it in annual programs. I like it better to do on more one-time type projects. But beyond that, I haven't given the way we brand it much thought.
I will bring that conversation up during budget as well. Heads up, we can both think about it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That looks like all of the questions. There is no motion required for this. It's just for information. So thank you very much. Are there any notice of motions this evening? Not seeing any. Are there any points of interest? I'll just bring the one up today. Attended the hydrogen state of the province. I guess it's the state of the province regarding hydrogen, where the premier was there today, and everybody who sits on the hydrogen hub and the accelerator, basically all of the Alberta Industrial Heartland got accolades for everything that is happening. So it was really well attended and great to hear that the province continues to be interested and moving the file along. So that's a good point of interest. Councillor inquiries to administration, anything? Not seeing any. Then I'll take a motion to go in camera for reasons as per FOIP listed. Councillor Kelly. Go ahead.
I move that council go in camera under the provisions of the Freedom of Information and Protection Act. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. This motion is closed. Please cast your vote. Just
I require Councillor Nguyen and
It didn't come
Councillor
up for me,
Abatoy.
but it didn't come up for me, so I vote in favor though.
okay. That is carried. So we'll go to chambers for in camera.